Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Alison Baden-Clay. Alison Baden-Clay was born on July 1, 1968 in a suburb of Brisbane. She grew up in a wealthy family and developed a love for ballet from an early age. After completing her schooling, she pursued further studies and proved herself to be an excellent student, fluent in 6 languages. In 1993, at the age of 25, Alison entered a local beauty pageant where she impressed the audience with her ballet skills. She then began her professional career in the Human Resources Department at the Brisbane Flight Centre. Here, her career progressed rapidly after her talent was recognized by her boss. It was while working at the center that she met her future husband, Gerard. Gerard Baden-Clay was born on September 9, 1970 in Bournemouth, United Kingdom. Gerard comes from a distinguished lineage with his great-grandfather, Robert Baden-Powell, a prominent British military leader and founder of the Scouting movement. Gerard moved to Zambia with his family when he was 1 year old, as it was the homeland of his father, Nigel Clay. They remained in Zambia for 8 years before migrating to Australia. Gerard then completed his studies in Australia, graduating with a degree in accounting. He eventually joined the Brisbane Flight Centre, where he met Alison. Gerard met Alison at the Brisbane Flight Centre, marking the beginning of their romance. They married on August 23, 1997, and then went on a trip around the world, visiting several countries including South America and Switzerland, with a temporary stay in London. When they returned to Australia, Alison returned to work at the Flight Centre, eventually being promoted to a management position. In 2002, Alison became pregnant and gave birth to her first child, a daughter named Hannah. After Hannah was born, Alison decided to focus solely on raising her children and taking care of her family. Gerard made several career changes during this time and opened a luxury real estate company in Brisbane in 2004. With the help of his parents, he invested a lot of time and effort into the business. The Gerard family had a second daughter, Sarah, born in 2004, followed by their youngest child, Ella, born in 2006. The family lived in a rented house in Brookfield, a suburb of Brisbane. Meanwhile, Alison spent most of her time looking after the girls at home. Over time, Alison began to notice that Gerard was increasingly distant from her. This eventually led to a shocking confession that he no longer loved her. Gerard's behavior towards Alison changed dramatically. He constantly criticized her, complaining about the meals she cooked and the cleanliness of the house. He called her lazy and said she was no longer attractive to him. Alison chose to remain silent in the face of these hurtful comments. In her diary, she poured out her heart, expressing her enduring love for Gerard, their frequent arguments, her feelings of guilt, and her determination to change to win his love back. Alison hid her family troubles behind a cheerful exterior, making her appear to be a warm, caring person, a devoted mother, and a loving wife. However, her family life took a difficult turn in 2011. Gerard's business suffered after the Queensland floods, resulting in a significant debt of around $1 million Australian dollars. That same year, in October, Alison discovered that Gerard was secretly having an affair with Tony McHugh, a co-worker. Gerard and Tony met in 2008 when Tony was a client and Gerard hired her. At the time, Tony was having marital problems after 17 years of marriage, which eventually led to Tony's divorce. Tony knew Gerard was married, but Gerard said that the relationship with Alison was loveless and that he was only staying for their daughter. Gerard promised Tony a future together and that he would marry her. In October 2011, Alison discovered that Gerard was having an affair with Tony. Gerard immediately ended the relationship and severed ties with Tony by firing her from his real estate company and reconciled with Alison. Tony still harbored hopes for a future with Gerard. For months later, in April 2012, Tony and Gerard were talking on the phone while Tony was driving home. They discussed an upcoming real estate conference, and Gerard casually mentioned that Tony would be meeting Allison there the next day. This revelation upset Tony, causing her to question the promises he had made to her, and to call him dishonest. Gerard apologized to Tony, reaffirmed his love for her, and reiterated his commitment to ending his marriage to Allison within 3 months. The following morning, April 20th, at 7:14 a.m., Gerard contacted the police in a distressed state, reporting that Allison had gone missing after going for a walk around 10 p.m. the night before. When police arrived at Gerard's home, they noticed deep, curved scratches on his face, which he claimed he had sustained while shaving. Further examination revealed small red marks on his chest, which Gerard explained were from a moth bite he had encountered while changing an outdoor light. A search of the house revealed no signs of a disturbance. Everything was in order, and the bed was made. Despite his stress, Gerard appeared calm and began getting his daughters ready for school and daycare. Police interviewed Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, who reported falling asleep after their mother turned off the lights and had not seen her since. During questioning, the crying girls described their parents as a happy and generally harmonious couple. Police searched the area and spoke to neighbors, but no one witnessed anything unusual. The only initial clues found were a small bloodstain on Allison's car and a strand of her hair in the trunk. A large-scale search operation soon followed, with rescue teams and volunteers searching woods, wells, manholes, and dams near the Allison family home. To aid the search efforts, a mannequin was placed wearing an outfit similar to Allison's last known outfit to aid the search efforts. As time went on, the chances of finding Allison alive diminished. Her friends clung to hope, not wanting to think the worst. Gerard appeared visibly upset as he tearfully pleaded with his wife to return, in front of the media. Behind the scenes, however, he instructed his lover, Tony, to keep quiet and put their relationship on hold, promising to reunite in the future. 10 days after Allison went missing, a boater made a horrifying discovery on the banks of Colorado Creek, about 8 miles from the Allison family home, on April 30th, 2012. The body was found in an advanced state of decomposition. The day after Allison's body was discovered, Gerard contacted his insurance company to inquire about filing an $800,000 life insurance claim on his wife. A medical examiner later formally identified the body as Allison Baden-Clay, 43, using dental records. Notably, Allison was still wearing the same clothes she had been wearing when she went missing. A post-mortem examination found that Allison's death was likely due to strangulation. Her death was therefore classified as a homicide, although determining the exact cause was difficult due to the advanced stage of decomposition of the body. On May 11, 2012, St. Paul's Cathedral in Brisbane held a funeral for Allison Baden-Clay, who had tragically passed away. Her husband, Gerard, was visibly overcome with emotion, crying throughout the service as he consoled his daughters and consoled Allison's parents. Hundreds of people attended the service. However, while Gerard was apparently mourning his wife's death, he was secretly communicating with his mistress, Tony, through public phone calls. He informed her of Allison's passing and urged her to keep their affair a secret from the police investigation. Meanwhile, the police began to question the story Gerard had given them. He claimed that Allison had gone for a walk around 10 p.m. and was gone when he woke up. However, conflicting evidence emerged. Police found that Gerard had charged his phone at 2 a.m. and was on his computer at 5 a.m., and forensic analysis showed that the marks on his cheeks were consistent with fingernail scratches. In addition, no blood was found on his razor. A biologist disputed Gerard's explanation of the caterpillar bites on his chest, stating that no caterpillars in the family's area could have caused such injuries. A separate expert examined Allison's hair and found 5 different types of leaves: eucalyptus, Chinese elm, myrtle, cat's claw vine, and herringbone fern. Two of these, eucalyptus and Chinese elm, were found growing directly under the bridge where Allison's body was discovered. In addition, all 5 types of leaves and thorns were found in the Allison family's backyard. On June 13, 2012, a month after Allison's funeral, 41-year-old Gerard Badenclay was arrested and charged with his wife's murder. He maintained his innocence and claimed he would fight the charges and applied for bail, which was immediately denied due to concerns that he might flee. During the investigation, police spoke to Tony, who revealed their 4-year secret relationship to Gerard. It was also discovered that just days before Allison went missing, Gerard had sent Tony a letter promising to be with Tony on July 1st, further complicating the case. The prosecution's theory was that Gerard had killed his wife, Allison, to collect life insurance money and pay off debts. They believed he also planned to move on with Tony McHugh. According to their theory, a fight broke out on the evening of April 19, 2012, while Gerard and Allison were watching TV after their daughters had gone to bed. During the argument, Allison allegedly scratched Gerard's cheek, leaving her fingernails to collect DNA evidence. Unfortunately, the DNA had degraded, making it impossible to determine its source. The prosecution claimed that Gerard strangled Allison, then dragged her body through the backyard, leaving her hair tangled with leaves. Gerard placed her body in the trunk of his car and drove to a nearby river, where he dumped her body under a bridge. The prosecution believed that Gerard thought the river would wash her body away, effectively covering up his crime. Gerard then allegedly returned home, charged his phone, cleaned the house, and reported Allison missing the next morning. After finding Allison's body, Gerard hired a criminal defense attorney and went to see him. During Gerard's 2014 murder trial for Allison, prosecutors were convinced that Gerard was guilty and argued that he had killed her. However, Gerard maintained that he had nothing to do with her death. He admitted that he and Allison had argued and suggested that she may have left the house late one night because she was depressed and may have taken her own life. However, Allison's family and friends rejected this idea. They were certain that Allison would never leave her daughters, as she loved them very much. Her friends had long spoken out against Gerard, describing him as arrogant, fake, and self-centered. They believed that Allison's deep love for him blinded her to these negative traits. During the trial, excerpts from Allison's diary were presented as evidence. The diary revealed how isolated she felt and how controlling Gerard was, especially after the birth of their first child. She described feeling trapped at home and detailed several instances of Gerard's controlling behavior. This included insulting her, monitoring her conversations with a baby monitor, controlling her finances, deleting relatives' contact details from her phone and blocking their calls. After Allison's death, Gerard's attempts to make an insurance claim were rejected, with the money being withheld until the trial was over. Another important testimony came from Melissa Romano, who had never met Gerard in person but had spoken to him on the phone in 2009 about a real estate deal. She testified that after the deal was finalized, Gerard called her out of the blue, suggesting, "I'm looking for someone to kill my wife." Melissa, stunned, questioned his motives, but Gerard abruptly redirected the conversation and ended the call. This testimony played a key role in the case against Gerard, which on July 15, 2014, Gerard Badenclay was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 15 years. In 2015, Gerard appealed his conviction, and the court reclassified the crime to involuntary manslaughter, shortening his prison term. However, the decision sparked widespread outrage, with around 4,000 people demonstrating in support of Allison's family. In response to public sentiment, in 2016, Australia's High Court overturned the Court of Appeal's decision, reinstating the original murder conviction. As a result, Gerard will not be eligible for parole until at least 2027. During his incarceration, Gerard initially behaved like a model prisoner. However, over time, he adapted to prison life and became less restrained in his behavior, leading to an incident where he clashed with a prison guard, which resulted in a stern reprimand. Following Gerard Baden-Clay's trial, his former lover, Tony McHugh, moved to Bali, where she spent her time teaching and doing charity work. 4 years later, she moved to the United Arab Emirates to continue her education career. Tony now lives a private life, keeping her personal information private. She occasionally connects with friends on social media using a private account, as she fears that Gerard may try to find her after his release. In a recent public statement, Tony expressed remorse for her actions and clarified that she never intended to cause Alison any harm. Alison's daughters Hannah, Sarah, and Ella Baden-Clay are living with her parents. Alison's assets, including her insurance money, have been passed on to her children. After completing her university studies in 2022, Hannah has followed in her mother's footsteps by pursuing a career in dance. In memory of her sister Alison, Vanessa set up a charity to combat domestic violence and support those affected, while raising awareness of the issue. The case of Shannon Mani. Shannon Mani was born on April 6, 1997, to Anshumani and Vijay Mani. When she was a small child, her parents immigrated to the United States from Fiji. The family settled in Waukesha, a small town in southeastern Wisconsin, where Shannon grew up and attended school. She was intelligent, attractive, and very outgoing. Her parents believed Waukesha was the perfect place to raise their children. After completing high school in 2015, Shannon enrolled at the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. She was passionate about helping others and aspired to become a social worker. Despite her busy schedule, Shannon worked with her father at an organic food company. It was at work that she met Quentin Neal, 26, who was applying for a similar position. Quentin had a strong desire to make a positive impact on people's lives. Shannon shared a similar passion, dreaming of building a shelter for women and children, while Quentin wanted to create a safe haven for his community. With their similar interests and outlook on life, Shannon and Quentin quickly formed a close bond. As their friendship blossomed into romance, Shannon was overjoyed to have met Quentin, and soon they started living together. Quentin showed genuine care for Shannon, and she ensured their relationship remained happy. They began making plans for their future together. However, their lives took a drastic turn when Shannon vanished without a trace. On April 13, 2018, Shannon failed to pick up her younger brother from school and didn't show up to work. Her phone was switched off, and she hadn't informed anyone about her absence from work. Concerned, her parents went to the police station, unable to locate their daughter. Initially, detectives suspected that Shannon, being young, might have run away or gone off with friends. But her parents disagreed, knowing their daughter well. She wasn't the type to simply switch off her phone and abandon her family, leaving them worried and searching for her. Shannon's mother shared crucial details with investigators, prompting them to take the case more seriously. Shannon was 4 months pregnant when she vanished, which raised concerns since pregnant women rarely disappear without something bad happening to them. Furthermore, some of her belongings, including money and important documents, were still in her room, which was another alarming indication. Shannon's parents told investigators that the father of her child was 27-year-old Quentin Neal. However, when Quentin was contacted by phone, he claimed to have no knowledge of Shannon's whereabouts. According to Quentin, Shannon had been living with her parents, and he hadn't seen her at all that day. The investigators called Quentin again, asking him to come to the police station to answer some questions. Quentin appeared anxious, promising to arrive at the station immediately. When Shannon's parents were still present, Quentin told the investigators that the last time he had seen her was over 24 hours ago, when she left his house to pick up her little brother from school. They had only exchanged a few text messages since then, and had not been in contact again. The investigators asked Quentin if he had any idea where Shannon might be, but he was unable to provide one. According to Quentin, Shannon's life revolved around school and work, and she had always been in touch with her loved ones until that day. However, Quentin recalled that there was another guy who had shown interest in Shannon, despite knowing she was in a relationship and pregnant. This guy had relentlessly pursued Shannon's affection, even after she asked him to leave her alone. The investigators instantly considered this guy a person of possible concern, as jealousy often leads to reckless behavior. The next day, police began questioning Shannon's friends to gather new information. They distributed details of the search for the young pregnant woman to all police stations in Wisconsin the same day. The first disturbing discovery was made. Shannon's car was found in Milwaukee, about 20 minutes from her home. Forensic experts carefully examined the vehicle inside and out, but found no suspicious signs. There was no evidence of carjacking, struggle, or any other crime. However, Shannon's purse and cell phone were missing from the car. 3 sets of fingerprints were found on the vehicle, including Shannon's and Quentin's. The origin of the third set remained unknown, and the police had to identify the person who left them. That same afternoon, the man mentioned by Quentin was questioned by investigators. Although he claimed to be upset about Shannon's disappearance, he denied Quentin's allegations, stating that he and Shannon were just friends and that he had never pursued a romantic relationship with her. When pressed further, he admitted to confessing his love to Shannon in the past, but she had rejected him, saying they could only be friends. Since then, he had not attempted to win her affection. The guy's fingerprints were found to match those in Shannon's car. However, he explained that he often got rides from Shannon to university, which is why his prints were in her car. He also claimed to have been 100 miles away from Waukesha, attending a baseball game when Shannon went missing. The investigators checked and confirmed his alibi, ruling him out as a suspect. The case got a surprising and crucial break when Shannon's mother, Anshumani, found her daughter's Apple Watch and checked her recent text messages. She took the watch to the police station, handing it over to investigators. Reviewing Shannon's texts, they made a significant discovery. Despite Quentin's claim that he hadn't met Shannon on the day she vanished, the texts showed they had arranged to meet up that day. This meant Quentin had lied to the investigators and Shannon's parents, making him the prime suspect. While examining Shannon's watch messages, investigators uncovered cracks in her relationship with Quentin. They found texts revealing Quentin's abusive behavior towards the pregnant mother. This revelation shocked Shannon, who had been unaware of her lover's true nature. Quentin apologized profusely, begging her not to leave him. Shannon proposed they take a break from each other. The investigators' suspicions grew, fueled by Quentin's troubled past. He had a criminal record, having recently been released from prison after serving time for robbery. He had multiple arrests for assault and other misdemeanors. Shannon's parents had also grown wary of Quentin, noticing their daughter's persistent depression. Moreover, Quentin exhibited emotional instability regarding the unborn baby, further solidifying the investigators' doubts about his character. After Shannon informed her parents about her pregnancy, they arranged a meeting with Quentin, during which he assured them that he would take care of both Shannon and the baby, claiming he had always wanted to have children. However, a few days later, according to Anshumani, Quentin sent Shannon some disturbing texts, contradicting his earlier promise and stating that he didn't want the baby. He even suggested that Shannon should consider having an abortion. The police attempted to track Shannon's cell phone and discovered it was last active in the afternoon of April 13th, near Quentin's residence. Shannon's mother noticed severe bruising on her arms and inquired about the cause. Shannon broke down in tears and revealed that Quentin had physically assaulted her, punching her with his fists while she was in her vehicle. Despite her parents' warnings to end the relationship, Shannon eventually forgave Quentin and resumed dating him. With this concerning information, investigators grew increasingly worried that they might not find Shannon alive. prompting them to obtain a search warrant and rush to Quentin's house. At first, the crime scene did not appear to show any signs of a struggle or disturbance. The area was clean, with no broken furniture or objects. Forensic experts sprayed the first floor with luminol, a chemical that detects blood, but found no evidence. However, when they applied the same test to the basement, the walls and floor glowed, indicating the presence of blood. The numerous marks found at the scene strongly suggested that Shannon was likely no longer alive. Quentin Neal was arrested and taken into custody. Before questioning him, investigators reviewed the contents of his phone and discovered that he had recently searched online for ways to remove evidence of a crime using a lye chemical. This suggested that he was planning to hide traces of his crime. During the interrogation, Quentin initially denied any knowledge of Shannon's whereabouts and claimed to have no connection to her disappearance. However, faced with solid evidence, he began to alter his story. Eventually, he agreed to confess to everything. Quentin claimed to have acted in self-defense when he took Shannon's life. He told investigators that Shannon had visited his house to discuss their future and their child. But the conversation escalated into an argument. According to Quentin, Shannon then entered the kitchen, grabbed a knife and a gun that were being kept for emergencies, and began threatening him. Quentin said he felt compelled to act quickly to protect himself, leading to a physical struggle that ended in Shannon's death. Quentin reiterated to the investigators that he had acted in self-defense, but they were skeptical due to the lack of defensive wounds on his body. Despite their doubts, they continued to listen to his account. Quentin said that, realizing the gravity of his actions, he panicked in the basement where the incident occurred. In an attempt to conceal the evidence, he used a large suitcase to hide the body. Quentin Neal led the police to a storage unit 6 miles from his home, where he had stashed a suitcase containing Shannon's body. When detectives opened the suitcase, they found Shannon's lifeless body, her wrists and ankles bound with duct tape, contradicting Quentin's claim of self-defense. Forensic examination revealed Shannon died from 2 gunshot wounds to the head and had additional knife wounds on her body. Shannon's parents were devastated when detectives informed them of the discovery of their daughter's body on April 18, 2018. Quentin Neal was subsequently indicted for the murders of Shannon Manny and her unborn child. The evidence gathered, including their correspondence from the day of her death, was sufficient for the court to reach a guilty verdict. The dispute had begun when Shannon visited Quentin's home to discuss her pregnancy, but she never left his house alive. The trial of Quentin Neal, accused of killing Shannon, was set to begin in the spring of 2019. However, just days before the trial, anonymous letters were sent to attorneys and court officials, claiming that someone else was responsible for Shannon's death. The letters were later deemed irrelevant after the author, a friend of Quentin's, was identified and found to be trying to confuse the investigation and help Quentin. Quentin faced the death penalty, but denied the charges and claimed he acted in self-defense. 15 months had passed since Shannon's death, and her family waited anxiously for justice, trying to stay positive. Shannon's mother, Ann Shamani, worked hard to keep her daughter's memory alive and not lose hope. Shannon had been passionate about supporting women and children affected by domestic violence, and her family had planned to build a shelter in her honor. However, that dream was never realized, as Shannon herself became a victim of violence. On July 15, 2019, Quentin Neal reached a plea deal with investigators, admitting guilt in the deaths of Shannon and her child. As part of the deal, prosecutors dropped the death penalty. 2 days later, on July 17, 2019, the Milwaukee County Circuit Court sentenced the 28-year-old to 2 concurrent life sentences without parole eligibility, ensuring he will spend the rest of his life in prison. At his sentencing, Neal remained silent, failing to explain his motive for the crime. Shannon's mother, Ann Shamani, expressed relief that justice had been served, noting that the only silver lining was that Neil would no longer harm anyone else. The family plans to keep Shannon's memory alive by opening a shelter in her honor. The case of Wendy Trapaga. Yolanda Cirillo was born in Miami, Florida. She was a 28-year-old single mother who lived a quiet life away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Yolanda had devoted herself to raising her daughter and being a model mother, giving up the party life. After a while, Yolanda was ready to find stability and a new partner. She began a relationship with Michel Escoto, a man known for his good looks and impeccable grooming. Their relationship, which started out innocent and harmonious, gradually developed into love. Yolanda and Michel met at a computer engineering school, although they had opposite personalities. She was calm and practical, while he was a romantic, adventurous, and gregarious person. Despite their differences, they found each other and began a promising relationship. Michel and Yolanda Cirillo seemed like an unlikely couple. However, after a year of living together, they started building a family. Yolanda, who already had a child from a previous relationship, was very happy to see her boyfriend Escoto loving her daughter. Everything seemed fine, but Michel still had one unfulfilled dream. He wanted to build a successful career and start his own business. Yolanda fully supported Michel's dream because she knew that his success would ensure a stable future for her and her daughter. She also hoped that they would get married and start a family. Michel promised Yolanda that he would give them the dream life they both craved when he achieved financial success. When looking at the most lucrative industries in Miami, Michel realized that there was a great demand for cosmetic services. So he decided to delve into this field. With a basic knowledge of hairdressing, he wanted to learn more about business to open his own salon. His goal was to create a space that was welcoming to everyone. Michel found a beauty school near where he lived and enrolled in February 2002. While studying at this school, Michel found himself different because he was one of the few men in the beauty industry, while he was surrounded by young, dynamic women. These women were very interested in Michel because he was charming and easily won their hearts. This made him popular among the female students. However, despite his relationship with Yolanda, Michel could not resist the charms of Wendy Trapaga, a beautiful 21-year-old girl. He began to flirt with her and often behaved inappropriately around her, but he still did not tell Yolanda about these things. Every night, Michel still returned to Yolanda, maintaining the appearance of a normal family life, but the more time he spent with Wendy, the more he felt guilty towards Yolanda. Wendy Trapaga was different from the women Michel had met before. Wendy was sweet, charming, and had the figure of a model. Wendy was born on April 29, 1981, the daughter of Miriam and Ernest. She grew up in a normal and loving family. Wendy had always been loved by her father, Ernest, who had always made sure that Wendy had grown up in an environment filled with love and respect. Ernest had been a cargo pilot, and his job had required him to travel frequently, which had made Wendy always look forward to his return from each trip. Every time he had returned home, Wendy had been extremely happy and had received a gift from him. March 31, 1988, had been an unforgettable day in Wendy's life, when she had been 16 years old. Wendy's father's plane had exploded at an altitude of 150 feet above the ground and had crashed into a barren land near the runway. This tragedy had taken the lives of all passengers on board. The deep sadness that Wendy had experienced that day had followed her throughout her life. Ernest had been 61 years old when he had passed away, leaving Wendy's mother, Miriam, deeply saddened. After becoming a widow, Miriam had devoted herself to supporting her family and had secured a position as a school administrative assistant. She had worked hard to be able to supervise extracurricular programs at an elementary school in Miami-Dade County. Eventually, Miriam had found love again and had married Juan Bonnets. Wendy had had half-siblings who had warmly accepted her, providing her with the much-needed affection she had been missing since her father's death. During her teenage years, Wendy had developed a strong passion for aesthetics and high fashion. She had possessed a captivating beauty with deep brown eyes, long hair, and a radiant smile, attracting everyone's attention. Despite this, Wendy had remained humble and kind, making those around her admire her even more. After completing her studies, Wendy had gotten married, but unfortunately, this marriage had soon fallen apart. This had motivated her to pursue her passion and learn from her relatives who had run beauty salons. So she had enrolled in Label Beauty Academy in Miami. There, Wendy had met Michel Escato, a man who could make her smile. Michel's charm and compliments had captivated her. Michel had introduced himself as an executive in the web design industry with a degree in technology. Perhaps the loss of her father at an early age had made Wendy more sympathetic to older men, considering them safe. However, Michel had not revealed to Wendy that he had a girlfriend, Yolanda. Instead, he had spent more time with Wendy. The feelings between Wendy and Michel had grown deeper and deeper, and they had spent more time together. While Yolanda had thought that Michel was focused on his career, the relationship between Wendy and Michel had naturally turned from emotional to physical. Wendy and Michel had gradually become inseparable. However, Yolanda had felt confused by the changes in her relationship with Michel, even though they had been together for more than 2 years. She had not known that Michel often met other women, one of whom had even sponsored his studies. Initially, Michel had only seen Wendy as a friend, but over time, he had begun to feel deeper feelings for her. He had appreciated the freedom and lack of pressure in his relationship with Wendy. However, Michel had always kept his relationship with Wendy a secret. Even though Michel and Wendy had been entering their second month of a romantic relationship, Michel had hidden it from everyone, which had made Wendy feel confused. Yolanda had also felt that Michel seemed to be growing more distant, and their relationship had started to feel more like best friends than lovers. Yolanda had become suspicious of Michel's schedule, and the silence had made the two of them grow more distant. Michel had eventually decided to end his relationship with Yolanda because he had fallen in love with Wendy. In August 2002, Michel and Yolanda had had an argument, and to express his dissatisfaction, Michel had packed his things and left. Yolanda could not believe it. Yolanda had dreamed of a future with Michel, but he had left without giving any explanation. Yolanda had tried to understand her shortcomings and the reason behind his departure. Yolanda had kept calling Michel, but he had not answered. Eventually, Yolanda had deciphered his voicemail password and had discovered messages revealing that he had moved in with another woman named Wendy. Yolanda was shocked to learn of Michel and Wendy's relationship and was furious. Michel and Wendy had moved into a modest apartment in Miami. Unexpectedly, in that small space, the two began a life filled with dreams and satisfaction. Although some of Wendy's family objected to her decision to live with Michel, Wendy's mother, Miriam, was concerned that Michel was almost a decade older than Wendy and, on top of that, he was still unemployed. She wondered if Wendy and Michel had ever shared their jobs or incomes. She was also extremely surprised to find that their house was almost bare, to the point that Wendy and Michel had to sleep on the floor. The most important thing to her was Wendy's happiness. While Wendy was always careful about her finances and kept a tight budget, Michel, on the other hand, was wasteful and unclear about how he earned his money. Miriam simply thought that Michel made money through IT to explain her doubts. Because there were so many questions about Michel, Miriam, and her daughter. Wendy disagreed about Wendy's marriage. Miriam did not agree with Wendy's hasty decision to get married. Ignoring her mother's advice, Wendy and Michel decided to go ahead with the wedding. They planned to hold a wedding ceremony at the City Hall in October 2002, with a simple legal procedure and a not-so-complicated wedding ceremony. When Miriam asked why they got married so quickly, Wendy revealed that she was pregnant. On October 10, 2002, Wendy and Michelle exchanged vows at the Miami Beach City Hall. They then planned a simple honeymoon in Key West, Florida. Michelle and Wendy left on Friday, October 11th, planning to return Sunday evening. Their two-day adventure in Key West was filled with fun times. However, on Sunday, Michelle and Wendy were reluctant to let their short vacation end. Michelle had booked a luxurious suite in a prestigious, romantic hotel. Wendy was thrilled to have their honeymoon extended unexpectedly. Wendy informed her mother of the decision to extend their stay. Wendy's mother, Miriam, was also delighted to hear the news. Although she was concerned about Wendy's health due to her pregnancy, Miriam was happy for her daughter's happiness. Michelle and Wendy envisioned a romantic evening that included dining out, perhaps watching a movie, or dancing the night away at a nightclub. Michelle and Wendy arrived at the hotel close to midnight and spent some time alone together in their room. Little did they know that this would be Wendy's last night on Earth. At around 5:30 a.m. on Monday, Miriam was awakened by a surprise phone call. When she looked at the clock, she felt anxious about such an early call. Miriam picked up the phone feeling even more nervous. It was Michelle on the other end of the line, asking her if Wendy was with her and speaking in a cryptic tone. Michelle explained that they had gone out drinking the night before and Wendy had wanted to stay even though he had been worried about their unborn child. This had led to their first argument in the car on the way home. He had gone back to the apartment alone while leaving her outside. When he had checked back after 5 to 10 minutes, she had disappeared. All attempts to contact her by phone had failed. After her conversation with Michelle, Miriam had agreed to give Wendy some space even though she was extremely worried about where Wendy might be at the moment. She had tried not to panic, but she had known that Wendy did not act that way. At 6 a.m., a sanitation worker walking his routine route through a commercial warehouse complex in the Northwest Dade area had contacted Miami police after noticing something unusual in the parking lot between two cars. As he had gotten closer, he had come across a woman wearing a blue evening gown lying face down in a pool of blood. Forensic experts had been stunned when they had arrived at the scene and had seen blood splattered on a nearby vehicle. An autopsy later revealed that the woman had been struck multiple times with a heavy object, leaving her body disfigured beyond recognition. Although no weapon had been found at the scene, the deceased had been quickly identified as Wendy Trapaga thanks to a driver's license and a wallet containing identifying items found next to her. When Miriam had received the devastating news of her daughter's death, she had been plunged into a deep depression. Tears streaming down her face, Miriam, who had lost her husband, now had to deal with the sudden loss of her daughter. As the detectives had worked to determine the cause of Wendy's death, Miriam had received a call from Wendy's husband, Michelle, asking for any updates on Wendy. Miriam had been speechless and had struggled to convey to Michelle that Wendy was no longer alive. A detective had intervened, taking over the call to inform Michelle that they would be visiting his home to discuss the matter in detail. Michelle had been completely stunned and unable to speak. The police had taken Michelle to the police station to gather more information. During a 14-hour interrogation, Michelle had recounted the events of the evening leading up to Wendy's tragic death. As they had left the hotel and driven home around 3 a.m., Michelle and Wendy had gotten into an argument over drinking. During the argument, Wendy had unexpectedly admitted to Michelle that she was not pregnant, which had added to the tension of the argument. As they had approached their apartment, Michelle had decided to go inside to give them both time to calm down, leaving Wendy in the car. That had been the last time he had seen Wendy. The autopsy report later revealed that Wendy had died from being repeatedly beaten with a blunt object, causing 15 to 20 severe injuries to her face and neck. Her face had been unrecognizable due to the injuries. There had also been signs of strangulation. Investigators had also found strange DNA on Wendy's dress. A physical examination had revealed that Wendy had had alcohol and sedatives in her system. Her estimated time of death had been between 3 and 5 a.m. on October 14th. Some strange points had also been discovered. Wendy had been found without shoes, but her feet had been clean. In addition, there had been no injuries to her hands and feet, suggesting that she might not have resisted during the attack, or that she might have been unconscious or restrained. The medical examiner had also confirmed that Wendy had not been pregnant at the time of her death, raising further questions about the reason behind her lie. Authorities had found a new lead. They had discovered that Michel had made a phone call at 3:15 a.m. the day his wife had died. Detectives followed up on a crucial lead and discovered that Michel's last call had been made to his ex-girlfriend, Yolanda. When informed of Wendy's death, Yolanda shared her love story with the police. She admitted to having had deep feelings for Michel and was heartbroken by his sudden passing. Despite attempts to contact him, he remained unresponsive until the fall of 2002, when he returned her call. When questioned, Michel admitted to having had an affair with another woman, but maintained that he had no feelings for Wendy. He said that he still loved Yolanda and hoped to reunite with her. Yolanda, who still loved Michel, trusted him again and hoped that this would rekindle their romance. However, Michel continued to live a double life. The investigation was hampered by the lack of solid evidence, including DNA, fingerprints, surveillance camera footage, or even a murder weapon. All they had were unsubstantiated statements. About 2 months after Wendy's death, Michel re-emerged as a prime suspect in the case. After being caught planning to cash in Wendy's life insurance policy, questions were raised about the true motives of Michel, who was the primary beneficiary of the policy. After this discovery, detectives suspected that Michel had a strong financial motive, seeing as the insurance policy was worth $1 million. The investigation team continued to pursue this theory. On the other hand, an unexpected aspect of Michel's personal history was revealed during the investigation. Michel had previously been arrested and charged with armed robbery. He was also charged with unlawful possession of a firearm and possession of drugs. 3 years after Wendy's death, detectives decided to interview Yolanda again, suspecting that she had more information than she had previously disclosed. After Wendy's death, Michel and Yolanda reunited and moved in together, but their life together was not a happy one. When Yolanda was brought in for questioning, law enforcement officers presented evidence that Yolanda had been the one who had funded Michel and Wendy's vacation after they had married. The police forced Yolanda to reveal the truth by warning her of the consequences of lying. Yolanda gradually opened up to the police. According to her testimony, when Yolanda and Michel resumed their relationship in the fall, Michel told her that he had to marry Wendy because Wendy was pregnant. However, in reality, Michel was indifferent to Wendy and planned to get rid of her to get the $1 million insurance money. Michel and Yolanda's ultimate plan was to kill Wendy and take her huge insurance money. Yolanda was blinded by her love for Michel and decided to go along with Michel's plan. The only thing she cared about was that Michel would reunite with her. According to the following testimony, after failing to get rid of Wendy during the holiday, Michel decided to take drastic action. Michel had laced Wendy's drink with a sedative in their hotel room. When Wendy began to fall asleep, Michel took her outside and put her in the car. In the middle of the night, Michel went to Yolanda's house and asked her to let him use her car. Michel then went to a parking lot far from the residential area in northwest Dade and asked Yolanda to stay in the car for a while. Yolanda then witnessed Michel returning to her car with blood on his hands and a crowbar. They continued to Biscayne Bay, where Michel removed the murder weapon and washed away the evidence of the crime. Yolanda then drove Michel back to the residence she shared with Wendy, where Michel disposed of his bloody clothes. However, Yolanda's testimony may have been unreliable. Yolanda may have been more directly involved in the murder of Michel's wife. If Michel had not used the crowbar to kill his wife, it was possible that Yolanda herself was responsible for the brutality and disfigurement of Wendy's body. Unfortunately, the truth of this case may have remained unknown due to Yolanda's immunity agreement that protected her from arrest or prosecution. This was used by Michel's attorney to place the blame entirely on Yolanda in order to protect his client. However, after deliberating for just 2.5 hours, the jury convicted Michel Escoto of first-degree murder and sentenced him to life in prison without parole. While Wendy's family finally felt that justice had been served after years of waiting, they were not entirely satisfied that Yolanda Cirillo would continue to walk free. The case of Jenna Oakley. Jenna Oakley was born on March 2, 2001, in Indiana. She lived with her mother and 2-year-old brother in a troubled home. Due to her mother's neglect and inability to provide a stable life, Jenna often found herself left alone from a young age. The situation worsened over time, leading to intervention from Child Protective Services in April 2016. As a result, Jenna and her brother were removed from their mother's care and relocated to live with Philip Oakley, who their father and his wife, Rhonda, who was 52 years old at the time. Rhonda welcomed the children into her home and accepted them as her own. Philip later revealed that Rhonda had been eager to be a good mother to her stepchildren from the start. She welcomed them into her home with open arms and worked to create a safe and comfortable environment for them. Jenna was a difficult child to manage. Despite her academic success, which earned her praise from her teachers, she struggled to follow the rules in her new home. Her behavior became an even greater concern when her parents discovered her relationship with a 20-year-old man named Kenneth, whom she had met at the age of 10 while living with her mother in Indiana. Kenneth was a mysterious figure who seemed to be both a supportive influence and a hindrance in Jenna's life. To better understand the events that unfolded, it's essential to delve into Rhonda's story and explore the complexities of her personality, as well as the significant impact she had on Jenna's life. Rhonda Oakley was born on March 5, 1964, in Casey County, Kentucky, to parents Howard Lee Raines and Mabel Walls Raines. She graduated from Casey County High School in 1982 and went on to work for 30 years in a prominent company that specialized in marketing, packaging, and printing services. Rhonda was a kind, loving, and cheerful person who was highly respected by her friends, who admired her warmth and kindness towards others. Rhonda met Philip Oakley on a golf course, and they fell deeply in love. They decided to get married and start a new life together. However, their relationship was not without its challenges. At the time, Rhonda was divorced and had 4 children from her previous marriage. Philip and Rhonda's family were initially against their relationship due to their significant age difference. They asked Philip to end the relationship, which led to frequent arguments within the family. For that reason, Philip believed the relationship of Kenneth and Jenna was unacceptable because Kenneth was 5 years older than his daughter, Jenna. Philip even threatened to involve the police if Kenneth continued to date Jenna. To maintain control of the situation, Philip and Rhonda took measures such as confiscating Jenna's phone and computer and enforcing strict rules. The situation at home became so unbearable for she that she finally confided in her father and stepmother, promising to end her relationship with Kenneth. However, she failed to keep this promise and continued to secretly meet with him. As a result, her relationship with her parents deteriorated, and she began to harbor a deep-seated hatred towards her parents. On September 1, 2016, at around 4 p.m., David, her younger brother, returned home from school and entered the house. As he walked into the kitchen, he was startled by the sound of 3 of their dogs barking frantically in the basement. Curious, David rushed downstairs to investigate and found his mother, Rhonda, lying motionless on the floor. Panicked, David immediately ran outside to seek help and eventually went to a neighbor's house to call the police. When the emergency services arrived, they were unable to revive Rhonda, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. The police found deep cuts on her neck, indicating a brutal attack. Initially, the police suspected a robbery, but upon further investigation, they discovered that nothing in the house had been stolen or disturbed. The investigation into Rhonda's death began, and her family and friends were left wondering who could have committed such a heinous crime. As the investigation progressed, several key pieces of evidence came to light. Rhonda's car was discovered to be missing, and a trash can in the kitchen was found to contain vomit. Furthermore, one of the large meat cleavers from the kitchen was found to be missing, leading investigators to suspect that it may have been the weapon used to attack Rhonda. When Philip returned home, he was questioned by detectives and informed them that his daughter, Jenna, had not attended school that day. In fact, Jenna had been unreachable since the incident, and her teachers had called Philip early in the morning to report her absence. This led the police to believe that Jenna may have been kidnapped by the same individuals who killed Rhonda, and that she may be in danger. During the questioning, detectives asked Philip if he knew of anyone who might have wanted to harm Rhonda or the family. Philip revealed that his daughter's boyfriend, Kenneth, had a troubled relationship with Jenna, and that it had deteriorated significantly. Philip admitted that he had threatened to contact the police if Kenneth did not stop seeing Jenna. Philip suspected that his daughter had been dishonest with him and that she and Kenneth had never intended to break up or follow the rules. It was possible that Kenneth had planned to get rid of the source of his problems and take Jenna with him. After learning this, the police focused their efforts on finding Kenneth. They discovered that on August 31st, the day before the incident, Kenneth had flown from Indiana to Lexington, Kentucky, at 3 a.m. From there, he took a taxi to Oakley's house. Another crucial piece of evidence came from a store manager in Denver, who claimed to have seen Jenna with a young man on September 1st. The manager handed over surveillance footage to the police, which showed Jenna and Kenneth entering the store and then leaving together to get into a car that looked like Rhonda's stolen vehicle. Notably, Jenna appeared calm and normal in the footage, not showing any signs of distress or being coerced. Her behavior led investigators to dismiss the possibility that she was being held against her will and raised suspicions that she might be involved in a crime against her stepmother. A search of Jenna's room later revealed a diary that confirmed these suspicions. The diary exposed a deep-seated hatred that her family seemed to be unaware of. Jenna wrote about her ongoing feelings for Kenneth, with whom she had maintained contact despite promising to stay away. Interspersed with these entries were expressions of resentment towards her family members, which grew increasingly disturbing over time. Jenna wrote in her diary that she intended to kill her father, stepmother, and brother to prevent them from ever separating her from Kenneth again, allowing her to be with him without interference. She outlined a specific plan and timeline to carry out these actions. When her father, Philip, read her words, he was overcome with shock and fainted. He struggled to comprehend that his daughter would not only conceive of such a heinous act, but also possess the determination to make it a reality. Jenna had a plan to kill her family members. First, she intended to kill her father between 4 o'clock and 5 a.m. by luring him to the basement and stabbing him in the neck. Her next target was Rhonda, whom she planned to kill in her bedroom between 6 o'clock and 8 a.m. using the same knife. After that, she planned to kill her brother David in his room. The police discovered Jenna's diary at the start of their investigation, which became the primary evidence against her. Meanwhile, Philip gave the police Kenneth's phone number, allowing them to track and apprehend Kenneth and his girlfriend. On September 4th, 3 days after the crime, investigators located the fugitives in Tucumcari, New Mexico. The police informed local authorities about the case, who quickly located Rhonda's stolen car near a hotel where Kenneth and Jenna were staying. They were arrested and transported separately to a New Mexico detention center, awaiting extradition. However, a search of the car did not yield the weapon used in the attack on Rhonda. Kenneth chose not to face trial. He attempted to take his own life in his cell by hanging himself and wrote a letter. Officers found him and rushed him to the hospital, where he was in critical condition. In his letter, Kenneth claimed responsibility for the crime and stated that he and Jenna acted according to his plan, attempting to take the blame to absolve her. The authorities kept Kenneth's attempt on his own life and his confession from Jenna for a time, deciding it was best she didn't know while being transported to Kentucky. They wanted her to give her own testimony without being influenced by Kenneth's actions. Upon arriving in Kentucky, Jenna also confessed to the crime, providing the police with a detailed account of her actions. According to Jenna, on the day before the crime, Kenneth visited her at her house. They met early in the morning, which is why Jenna didn't attend school that day. They spent the entire day together. Rhonda arrived home around 3 p.m. and encountered Kenneth in the basement. This encounter sparked an argument between Rhonda and Jenna, which eventually turned violent. The violence escalated to the point where Jenna attempted to strangle Rhonda by grabbing her neck. Kenneth then intervened, taking over from Jenna. He grasped Rhonda's throat with such force that she soon lost consciousness and fell to the floor. Once Rhonda was unconscious, Jenna took a kitchen knife and inflicted fatal wounds on her neck, leading to her death. Witnessing the scene caused Kenneth to become ill, and he vomited into a trash can. When questioned by the police about the knife used in the crime, Jenna stated that she and Kenneth had disposed of it during their escape. They had wrapped the knife in a bag and thrown it away at a fast food restaurant. Jenna provided this testimony while Kenneth was still in serious condition at the hospital. He was charged with first-degree murder but was unable to stand trial due to his self-inflicted injuries. After 6 weeks on life support, he passed away. In October 2019, Jenna was formally charged with her stepmother's death. The charges alleged she either caused the death or collaborated with someone else. She also faced a theft charge. Jenna was held without bail at a juvenile detention center. Her father, Philip, stated he didn't care that she was his daughter and felt she didn't deserve his protection after the incident. He hoped Jenna would receive the punishment she deserved. Jenna wasn't informed of Kenneth's death until a court hearing, where she fainted upon learning the news. After regaining consciousness, she screamed, cried, and struggled to calm down. In January 2019, Jenna pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter and expressed regret for her actions in court the following month. She expressed remorse for the pain, anger, and disappointment she caused. Upon learning of the plea deal, Philip expressed disappointment, stating that the system failed to prevent the crime against his wife. He claimed there were warning signs that Jenna was in trouble, but no one took action. Philip added that people often advise going to the police immediately, which he and his wife did, yet they still found themselves in a terrible situation. At the sentencing hearing in March, Susan Hooper, a mitigation specialist for the defense, explained that the defendant suffered from abuse, violence, neglect, and lack of basic human rights throughout her life. The lawyer questioned what could have driven a 15-year-old with no history of violence to commit such a crime. The lawyer noted that Jenna had no prior record, was respected by teachers and peers, and it was unclear what led her to take such a desperate step. It was also noted that none of Jenna's family attended the hearing. Philip declined to participate, and Jenna's mother never appeared in court to learn her daughter's fate. This was unusual, as parents typically show interest in the case's progress, even in difficult cases where the accused has committed serious crimes. The lawyer, Susan, gathered extensive evidence and records showing that Jenna was abandoned by her mother, Christ, who neglected her well-being. Susan conducted an in-depth examination of Jenna's early life by reviewing child care and medical records in Indiana and Kent. She also interviewed various individuals who knew Jenna, including neighbors, family friends, caregivers, teachers, school counselors, and her older half-sister. The sister's testimony was particularly relevant, as she had lived with Jenna for several years. According to the sister, they never had a stable or safe home environment. After Christ's divorce from Philip, she started working at a local Indiana prison, where she became romantically involved with an inmate. She eventually posted bail for him, and he moved into their home. This marked the beginning of a nightmare for Jenna, who was only 3 years old at the time. The man consistently robbed them and brought other women into the house, all while Jenna and her brother were present. A neighbor contacted Child Services after discovering that Jenna's family home was infested with rats and that the young children were being left alone all day. When a social worker visited the home, she encountered a hostile mother who refused to let her inside. Upon eventually gaining entry, the social worker was met with a horrific scene. The house was filled with rotting food, piles of trash, rat droppings, and human waste. The kitchen was overrun with unwashed dishes, covered in mold and infested with rodents and insects, including a large number of cockroaches and fleas. The children were living in deplorable conditions, with no regard for their safety. They had unrestricted access to medications and other hazardous substances, further endangering their well-being. Despite efforts to improve their situation, relocating Jenna and her younger brother to live with their father in Kentucky did not alleviate their problems. Susan stated that Philip and Rhonda neglected them, forcing Jenna to sleep in an unclean basement. However, the lawyer countered that Jenna had simply moved from one unstable home to another. Prosecutor Richie Borms presented evidence during the hearing, demonstrating that Philip made every effort to provide for the children's needs and create a good home. Despite the defense attorney's claims, Borms argued that if abuse or neglect had occurred, child care services would have been notified by Jenna's neighbors, friends, or teachers. Furthermore, the prosecutor inquired if the defense attorney was aware of Jenna's relationship with Kenneth and the fact that her parents disapproved of they. The defense attorney stated that Kenneth was the only person who genuinely cared for the accused, Jenna. According to the defense, Jenna's past experiences had left her with unmet emotional needs. She was searching for someone to provide her with the love and care she had always lacked, and having lost that person, she was now devastated. Defense attorney Anthony Lee Taylor presented scientific documents to justify Jenna's behavior. The articles explained how the child abuse Jenna suffered at a young age had negatively impacted her psychological development. Anthony told the court that his conversations with Jenna led him to believe that she lacked parental love and that her strained relationship with her mother contributed to her inappropriate relationship with Kenneth. Jenna supported this statement by reading a letter in which she expressed her deep regret and apologized to her family for her actions. She acknowledged the pain she had caused Rhonda's family and friends and claimed that she had since become a completely different person, distinct from the Jenna who committed the crime. When Philip stepped up to the podium, the atmosphere in the hall became tense. He and his daughter were visibly anxious about the impending conversation. Philip approached Jenna, looked her straight in the eye, and asked what had driven her to commit such a serious offense. He reminded her that as her father, he had always treated her with respect, and that Rhonda had never spoken ill of her or caused her harm. Philip explained that when they took Jenna in, it was to give her a better life, and that Rhonda had cared for her like her own daughter. However, Philip acknowledged that Jenna had been a challenging teenager, and that he and Rhonda had discussed sending her to a specialized institution to help her get back on track. Philip also shared his concerns about Jenna's relationship with Kenneth, describing him as a predator who had taken advantage of his underage daughter. Philip revealed that when he discovered Jenna and Kenneth were still in contact despite being forbidden from doing so, he reported Kenneth to the police and warned him to stay away from Jenna, threatening legal action if necessary. Philip turned to his daughter, visibly shaken. He condemned her crime as unforgivable, citing Rhonda's exceptional character as a wonderful woman and mother, unmatched by anyone. He emphasized how Jenna's actions had devastated not only Rhonda but also others. Philip then questioned why Jenna planned to harm him and her brother, arguing that she was not a victim, but rather someone influenced by circumstance. Despite this, he concluded by reaffirming his love for her, saying that regardless of her actions, she would always be his daughter. Jenna, overwhelmed, burst into tears, shouting at her father that she never felt part of the family and had never experienced his love. Following this outburst, the judge called for a recess to deliberate the verdict. On March 27, 2019, the verdict was announced. Jenna Oakley was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with 10 years for first-degree murder and 5 years for car theft. She would be eligible for parole in 2034. This case served as a reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, ultimately prevails, and those who commit heinous crimes will face their due punishment. The case of Lori Slasinski. Lori Slasinski was born on September 21, 1981, to her parents, Casey and Arlene Slasinski. With her blue eyes and blonde hair, Lori was cherished by her family, including her older brother, Paul. The Slasinski family originally hailed from New York State but moved to the rural Alabama farmland near Auburn when Lori was 13 years old. Growing up in the countryside, Lori developed a strong love for animals. Her friends described her as beautiful, and she enjoyed spending time with them, watching movies, riding her bicycle, and playing video games. Alongside her enjoyment of life, she was quite dedicated to her studies, and her family did their best to support her. After graduating from high school, Lori decided to attend Auburn University, where she chose to major in psychology and minor in criminology. To help her transition to college life, her parents purchased a mobile home for her to live in off-campus, situated in a well-kept trailer park popular among students. She lived there with her cherished dog, Peanut, a Yorkshire Terrier. Lori maintained a strong relationship with her family, with her mother calling her every day to see how she was doing. In 2005, she graduated with honors from Auburn University. Shortly after, she started working at the East Alabama Mental Health Center while continuing to live in a trailer park. She also planned to pursue a master's degree in psychology in the near future. Lori's family was proud of her accomplishments, unaware of the trouble that was on the horizon. On June 10, 2006, 24-year-old Lori planned a girls' night at her best friend Lindsay Braun's house. They intended to have drinks and watch a movie. Lori met Lindsay in their junior year at Auburn University, and they quickly became friends due to Lori's sweet and outgoing personality. Their friendship strengthened further when they both started working at the same mental health facility after graduation. Around 6:30 p.m. on June 10th, Lori called Lindsay to say she was stopping at the store before heading to her house for movie night. Unfortunately, she never arrived. Lindsay became concerned when she didn't hear from Lori that night or the next day. She called Lori multiple times and left messages on her answering machine but received no response. When Lori failed to show up for work on Monday, June 12, Lindsay became very worried. It was unusual for Lori to miss work without notifying anyone. After Lori missed work again on Tuesday, June 13th, Lindsay and another coworker decided to check on her at home. When they arrived at Lori's trailer, Lindsay noticed that Lori was not there. The door was unlocked and the air conditioning was running, which was unexpected. Inside, Lindsay saw that Lori's dog, Peanut, was in his crate. He appeared healthy and content, suggesting that someone had been taking care of him. Remarkably, his crate was clean, despite Lori being missing for several days. Lindsay sensed something was wrong, as it was unusual for Lori to leave her pet unattended. She recalled that Lori had placed 3 rugs on her kitchen floor because the dog wouldn't walk on the tile. However, those rugs were now missing, as well as the outside trash can. Later that day, June 13, 2006, Lori's mother, Arlene, received a call from her workplace about Lori missing work for 2 consecutive days. Arlene tried calling Lori but couldn't reach her. Concerned for her daughter's safety, Arlene hurried to Auburn after informing her husband, Casey, about Lori's disappearance. When she arrived, Arlene entered Lori's trailer and noticed something was off. The door was slightly open, and Lori's bed was neatly made, but Lori was nowhere to be found. Her car was also missing. Upon further inspection, Arlene saw that several items were missing: Lori's kitchen rugs, a pillow from her couch, a Galileo thermometer, a green trash can that Lori used for her rake and shovel, and the phone cord for her landline. A sense of alarm started to rise in Arlene as she understood that something terrible had happened. She officially reported her daughter missing, but still holding out hope that she would return. The police began their investigation and searched Lori's trailer home. While they didn't find any clear evidence pointing to a suspect, they did see signs of a struggle and scuff marks on the wall. On the bed sheet, they discovered semen and found traces of blood on the doorknob. A coat hanger and a single golden hoop earring were also collected from the scene. On June 10, 2006, police obtained surveillance footage showing Lori at an Alabama Walmart, marking the last confirmed sighting of her. After this, no one knew what had happened to her. Later that afternoon, Arlene received a phone call from one of Lori's friends, a 25-year-old named Daryl Richard Ennis, commonly known as Rick. He claimed he had seen Lori on the day she went missing and suggested that she might have gone off to make a drug deal. Lori had met Daryl at the bowling alley where he worked and often spent time there while she was a student. Arlene recognized Daryl because Lori had invited him to celebrate Christmas with their family in 2005, feeling sorry for him since he had no family of his own. However, Arlene found it hard to believe Daryl's story. Despite Lori's friendship with him, she was convinced her daughter would never be involved in drug dealing. Arlene suspected that Daryl was lying but had no idea why he would make such a claim. Daryl provided the police with information about Lori's disappearance, but before they could act on it, a shocking discovery occurred. On June 14, 2006, just 4 days after Lori went missing, her car was discovered fully engulfed in flames near the bowling alley where Daryl had previously worked. This shifted the investigation from a missing persons case to a potential homicide. Investigators noted that the fire destroyed any evidence that might have been in the car, but Lori was not inside when it burned. Nearby, a hand-rolled cigarette was found on the ground, along with a gas can located in the woods. This incident deeply distressed Lori's family, leading them to believe that something terrible had happened to her. The only lead they had at the time was the information provided to Arlene. When Daryl was questioned, he repeated the same story he had told Arlene but added more details. He stated that he and Lori had grown marijuana together and suggested that she might have gone off to sell her portion of it. He also mentioned that Lori could have been involved with some dangerous people. The police searched Lori's trailer, but despite a thorough investigation, they found no evidence of her dealing drugs. During the interview, investigators noticed several scratches on Daryl's hands and arms, which he said were from his dog. Investigators uncovered troubling information from Lori's friend, Lindsay. During their last phone conversation on the day Lori disappeared, Lindsay heard Daryl speaking in the background. Since Daryl was a friend of Lori's, Lindsay didn't think much of it at the time. When Lindsay texted him to ask about Lori's whereabouts, he replied that Lori was fine when he left her. Lindsay also told investigators that before Lori went missing, she had mentioned that he had written her a love letter, but she did not feel the same way. Lori had expressed to Lindsay that she was not romantically interested in Daryl and intended to discuss this with him. Investigators later learned that Daryl had informed his friends about his letter and Lori's rejection. When police re-interviewed him to confront him with new information from Lindsay, he admitted to meeting her just hours before Lori disappeared. He maintained that Lori was in good spirits and was getting ready to go to the store when he left her house. However, detectives identified several inconsistencies in his story, which led them to consider Daryl their main suspect. Their suspicion intensified after searching his car, where they found several significant items, including a knife, cleaning supplies, and handcuffs. Investigators started digging into Daryl's past to find more evidence, but they were unprepared for the shocking discoveries. They uncovered that Daryl, at just 12 years old, had murdered his mother and stepfather. On March 3, 1993, only 10 months after their marriage, Daryl killed his mother, a well-liked churchgoer, by first shooting her in the face and then beating her to death with a baseball bat in their trailer in North Montgomery, Alabama. His stepfather, Eddie Joe Flowers, suffered the same fate when Daryl shot him in the face with a shotgun upon his return from work. After the murders, Daryl drove the family car and crashed it into a fence along the highway. Alabama State Trooper John Clark found Daryl walking on the road. When asked about his parents, Daryl admitted that he had killed them. During a search of the backpack he was carrying, Detective Clark discovered a kitchen knife and ammunition for both a 12-gauge shotgun and a .22 caliber firearm. When questioned about his motives, the emotionless 12-year-old stated that he was angry because his parents planned to move, and he didn't want to leave his school. Investigators believe that Daryl lived with his parents' bodies while still attending school. He also confessed that he intended to kill his 3 stepsisters, which shocked the investigators. Although his murders were horrific, he was too young to be tried as an adult. As a minor, he received a 9-year prison sentence for the double murder. After his release, he moved to Auburn, where he met Lori Slasinski. When Lori went missing, Daryl became the main suspect. However, despite his criminal history and the abundance of circumstantial evidence, authorities could not charge him with Lori's murder without her body or any direct evidence linking him to the crime. A few weeks after being interviewed by detectives, he left Auburn and eventually settled in Huntsville, Alabama, in 2007. By that time, Lori's case had grown cold. After moving to Huntsville, Daryl quickly moved in with a roommate named Abram. Abram noticed that Daryl had brought kitchen rugs with him, which he said were a gift from someone. Daryl also mentioned to Abram that he was in love with a woman from Auburn who had mysteriously disappeared, but he did not reveal her name. Abram thought these conversations were normal until he discovered his troubling past. This prompted him to ask Daryl to leave immediately. When Abram returned to his apartment, he found it in complete disarray. The police later recovered the rugs, and one of them tested positive for Daryl's blood. Abram also recalled seeing a Galileo thermometer in Daryl's room before he moved in, which was the same type that was missing from Lori's home. Unfortunately, the police were still unable to connect Daryl to Lori's murder, as the main suspect remained unidentified. The case stayed unresolved, leaving Lori's heartbroken family searching for answers for years. For many years, there were no developments in the case. Then, in 2016, Mark Whitaker, a special agent with the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation, established a cold case unit to re-examine Lori's disappearance. He worked with his longtime partner, Agent J.W. Barnes. Lori's case was their first focus. They revisited the evidence, sent some items to forensic labs for testing, and conducted multiple interviews. As they reviewed the evidence, Daryl became their primary suspect. Agent Mark was aware of Daryl's past and felt strongly that he had harmed Lori, but he struggled to find enough evidence or a body to prove his guilt. In an unexpected turn of events, Agent J.W. Barnes, who is Agent Mark's partner, discovered a crucial piece of evidence while reviewing old files. He found an unopened report in an envelope that had been untouched for 10 years. After Lori disappeared in 2006, the police collected evidence from her trailer, but no one followed up until the results were finally analyzed. The analysis revealed that semen found on Lori's bed sheet and blood on the inside of the front door matched the DNA of Daryl Ennis. With this evidence, investigators were able to build a strong case against him, leading to an indictment in 2018. At that time, Daryl was happily engaged to a school librarian named Elena Atkinson and was living in Pilot, Virginia, where he worked for a company that designed and built portable living structures called yurts. On August 6, 2018, which was his 38th birthday, Darrell Ennis was arrested by a U.S. Marshals task force 12 years after Lori Slasinski disappeared from Auburn. While Lori's family felt relieved, Darrell's fiancée and co-workers were taken aback by the news. He faced 2 counts of capital murder. The trail finally started on April 1, 2022. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting Darrell's involvement in the crime, including a cigarette butt found in Lori's bed sheet that contained his DNA. In response, the defense claimed that police might have taken the cigarette from Darrell's home and planted it at the scene. They also attempted to undermine Lori's character, suggesting she was a drug dealer to account for his DNA being on the bed sheet. Darrell claimed he had consensual sex with Lori before she disappeared, implying that they were still intimate despite her rejecting him. However, his account lacked credibility, especially after 2 witnesses provided shocking information. One former co-worker from Alabama, Jeremy Brooks, reported that on June 9, 2006, just 1 day before Lori's mysterious disappearance, he received a call from Darrell. He asked Jeremy if he could bring him gas and if he could keep the gas tank. Jeremy refused and recounted. He said he had run out of gas and wanted me to help him. Later, after police discovered Lori's burned car, they found a gas can that matched the description of a can missing from the bowling alley where Darrell worked. Terry Booth, a former co-worker from South Carolina, shared a disturbing experience she had with Darrell years earlier. She recalled asking him why he had moved from Auburn, to which he responded that he needed to get rid of a body. At the time, Terry believed he was joking, but Darrell's later arrest for the murder of Lori changed her perspective. Despite Darrell consistently denying the allegations and asserting his innocence, the jury reached a guilty verdict after 2 days of deliberation. He was initially facing the death penalty. However, the district attorney decided to remove that option after consulting with Arlene. Arlene expressed that agreeing to a life sentence without parole for Darrell would spare her from lengthy appeals while ensuring he would remain incarcerated permanently. On April 14, 2022, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and is currently held at the William E. Donaldson Correctional Facility in Bessemer, Alabama. For Arlene, this verdict brought mixed emotions. With tears in her eyes, she expressed that it forced her to confront the painful reality that Lori would never return home, a hope she had clung to in her heart. In reflecting on Lori Slasinski's tragic story, it's impossible to ignore the heart-wrenching details that unfolded throughout her case. From her vibrant personality and promising future to the chilling revelations of Darrell Ennis's past, every twist and turn serves as a reminder of the fragility of life. The love between Lori and her family, especially her mother Arlene, paints a poignant picture of loss and longing for closure. The perseverance of investigators and the eventual breakthrough in the cold case remind us that justice, though sometimes delayed, can still prevail. As we honor Lori's memory, we recognize the profound impact her life and disappearance have had on all who knew her, as well as the vital importance of safeguarding our communities from those with dark histories. The case of Christina and Thompson Harris. Christina and Thompson and Jason Thomas Harris, both 40, had been married for 11 years by 2014. They got married in 2003, after dating for about 5 years. In 2009, Christina and Jason welcomed their first child, which brought significant changes to their lives. Despite the daily challenges and responsibilities, they were happy to be parents. Christina took care of the house and the children, while Jason worked at a plastics factory. As the children grew up, Christina was able to contribute financially to the family by working. However, in May 2014, she had to take maternity leave because she was expecting their second child in a few weeks. On September 29, 2014, Jason chatted with Christina while at work. Christina was suffering from a cold. She had a bad cough and was not sleeping well, but she reassured her husband that she was fine. A few hours later, Jason called his wife at home but received no response, which worried him. Unable to reach Christina, Jason asked a neighbor to check on her. He explained that Christina was sick and not answering the phone. The neighbor knocked on the front door but got no answer, so she called Christina's name. Receiving no response, she decided to try the door, found it unlocked, and entered the house. When she entered the bedroom, she found Christina lying on the bed and could not wake her. The neighbor called 911 and ran out of the house to call another neighbor, a nurse. The nurse checked Christina's pulse and confirmed that she had died. Thus, on September 29, 2014, 4 months after the birth of her second child, Christina was found dead at home. When the police arrived, Jason Harris was present. He told the police and paramedics that his wife had been sick but was alive when he left for work that morning. 2 days later, the medical examiner ruled that Christina died from an overdose of a controlled substance, a finding that shocked her family and friends. Most people who knew Christina, a mother of 2, including a newborn, believed that she had never used drugs. Christina's mother, Kathy, told police that her daughter was fine when she saw her the day before she died. Police were therefore skeptical of Jason Harris's claim that his wife had a cold. According to Kathy, Christina said her marriage to Jason was complicated. Jason was unhappy with the marriage but did not want a divorce because of concerns about child support and custody. Neighbors who discovered Christina's body also provided additional information to the police. Jason reportedly told them that the night before Christina died, he had prepared cereal with milk for her, then Christina passed out and dropped the plate. Police realized that Christina's family and friends had a hard time accepting that she might be involved in drugs. Instead, police suspected that Jason Harris was involved in Christina's death. Christina's mother and sisters insisted that police test her breast milk. According to Kathy, the police ignored the request for 48 hours. However, thanks to the family's persistence, the police finally agreed to investigate. As a result, breast milk was used as evidence for the first time in Michigan history. As confirmed by Christina's family and friends, all drug tests at her workplace and at the hospital where she gave birth to her second child were negative. Her second child was only 4 months old when Christina died. Christina was breastfeeding, and Kathy confirmed that Christina was very careful about what she put into her body because she didn't want to affect her child. Christina often pumped breast milk while at work and stored it in the freezer. Some of the breast milk was left at Kathy's mother's house. They tested 3 bags of breast milk for possible drug residue. These bags were labeled with the date they were put in the freezer so Christina knew which bag to thaw first. Experts tested all the samples, including the ones frozen just before Christina died, and found no signs of drugs. This proves that Christina did not use the substance that killed her. Jason Harris's sister was the only one who suggested that Christina had used drugs, prompting investigators to focus more on Jason and treat Christina's death as a homicide. The investigation was slow, and it is unclear what would have happened if Christina's family had not been actively involved in the search for the truth. Kathy repeatedly reminded Davison police about her daughter's case in August 2016, nearly 2 years after Christina's death. Not seeing the enthusiasm and desire to solve her daughter's case in Davison, Kathy asked Davison police to turn the case over to the Michigan State Police, which had new investigators. From there, the story began to unravel. Police gathered a lot of information about Jason Harris, including how he acted before and after his wife's death. Jason had been having affairs with other women. Christina knew about this and confided in her family and co-workers that Jason had been texting other people while she was giving birth to their youngest child. Christina once told a co-worker that if she died, Jason would be the cause. When asked if she was serious, she said yes. Jason told his coworker that he suspected the second child was not his biological child. He also complained that after the birth, Christina became depressed, often stayed in bed, and did not go to work. Jason often complained about Christina nagging him. A coworker of Jason recalled that Jason may have told him that he wanted Christina dead. He described the relationship between Jason and Christina as toxic and recalled that they argued frequently. One of the most surprising and shocking things about this case is that Jason Harris did not hesitate to let everyone know that he wanted to get rid of his wife. He tried to do so, but unfortunately, no one paid attention to his words and actions before Christina died. Jason bought poison twice and mixed it into her drink. Both times, Christina felt that the taste was unusual and did not drink it. Jason then asked a coworker to find him a poison that would not change the taste or smell of drinks or food. Jason said he wanted to knock Christina unconscious so she would not feel anything. When he shared with the coworker that Christina would not drink water because it tasted strange, the coworker refused to talk to him further. The coworker testified that Jason had talked about wanting Christina to stop nagging and that the coworker thought Jason was joking. Jason also told a coworker that he had hired someone to kill Christina, but the person was arrested for another reason before the murder. Jason therefore offered the coworker $10,000 from Christina's $100,000 life insurance policy to kill her. The coworker refused the offer, thinking that Jason was just venting his anger by talking about his wife and making inappropriate jokes. According to the colleague, he recalled a conversation with Jason in which Jason said, "I'm bored with her. I'm going to dump her." The police then decided to question the neighbor who discovered Christina's body. The neighbor testified that she saw Christina's family truck in the driveway. But Christina did not come to the door. She entered the house and found Christina lying in bed, unresponsive. The neighbor asked Jason if she should try to wake her up. He replied that Christina must have fallen asleep and that he would come home. The neighbor went back inside and removed the covers around Christina because she felt cold and had foam coming from her mouth and nose. The neighbor called 911 and another neighbor who was a registered nurse. The neighbor, who was a registered nurse, testified that Christina was cold, stiff, had no pulse, and had white foam coming from her mouth. She did not attempt to resuscitate Christina because she believed she was already dead. Jason told the police that he asked a neighbor to check on Christina and that he had to rush home because Christina was unresponsive. However, witnesses said Jason did not appear anxious or in a hurry. What raised suspicions about Jason was that morning, he called Christina's supervisor at work. He told her that Christina had died the night before and that he wanted to inquire about the $100,000 death benefit from Christina's life insurance policy through work. Additionally, one of the women Jason had an intimate relationship with told investigators that Jason had contacted her on the day of Christina's death and said that his wife had died from an overdose of a controlled substance. This suggests that he knew what caused Christina's death even before the medical examiner's report. That evening, the neighbor he had asked to check on Christina saw him in his driveway. She said that Jason told her that Christina was not the angel her parents thought she was and that their child would soon learn all the good and bad things about Christina. He said that Christina dropped her bowl of cereal, and he told her to go to bed. Jason also told a neighbor that his wife tossed and turned during the night and that he heard her coughing before he left for work. Jason wondered if that was her last breath. Jason told a police officer that Christina was coughing a lot when he left the house. He also told the police that Christina fell asleep eating cereal the night before she died. Finally, Jason told Christina's mother, Kathy, that before she died, Christina complained that her water tasted like chemicals. One of the main motives in this case is believed to be insurance money. Within a week of Christina's death, Jason and his mother went to Christina's workplace to inquire about the life insurance money. Additionally, Jason received a $20,000 death benefit from a life insurance policy issued by his company shortly after Christina's death. One of Jason's lovers moved in with Jason and his children. Christina's mother believed that Jason's lover moved in with him after Christina's funeral. However, Jason's neighbor testified that the lover had even moved into Jason's home before Christina's funeral. The neighbor added that Jason's adult children from a previous marriage moved into the home within days of Christina's death. Police also discovered that Jason Harris purchased a plane ticket to Rhode Island 9 days after Christina's death to visit a woman with whom he had exchanged more than 5,800 text messages. County Medical Examiner Dr. Brian Hunter submitted post-mortem blood and urine samples for laboratory testing. Dr. Hunter determined that the test results were consistent with Christina being poisoned by a lethal substance. Initially, Dr. Hunter determined that her death was an accident. Because there were no injection marks on Christina's body and investigators did not find any powder residue or rolling papers next to the bed where Christina died. In 2016, the Michigan State Police took over the investigation into Christina's death. In 2019, after Christina's family disputed Christina's cause of death, Dr. Hunter later changed Christina's death certificate from an accident to a homicide. Police charged Jason with first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and delivery of a controlled substance resulting in death. He was denied bail. Jason's attorney, Nicholas Robinson, said his client pleaded not guilty to the charges and wanted to fight them. When he was arrested, Jason had lost his job after testing positive for drugs. Kathy's efforts to ensure that law enforcement would punish the person responsible for her daughter's death were not overlooked. Gena's County Prosecutor David Layton said that a few years ago, he began receiving Facebook messages and emails from a Davidson woman who claimed her daughter had died and that her death was not an accident. "It can't be happening," the woman told the prosecutor. She was certain that someone had caused her daughter's death. Kathy's passionate pleas caught David Layton's attention, prompting authorities to re-examine the death of her daughter, Christina. "I will never forget what she wrote in an email, Prosecutor, you are my last hope. This is our last chance to get justice for my daughter. Please help me," David Layton said. "At that moment and as I spoke to her this morning, I was absolutely convinced that her daughter's death was not an accident. It was the result of foul play. It was Kathy's relentless efforts to seek justice for her daughter's death that led to this situation. And those efforts paid off." The trial began in 2020. The prosecution alleged that Jason put a controlled substance in his wife's cereal bowl to kill her. He then went to work as usual, waited a few hours, and asked a neighbor to check on Christina. According to the prosecution, Jason wanted someone else to discover his wife's body in order to reduce suspicion against him. The direct evidence against Jason was overwhelming. Jason had a motive for killing Christina. He was having an affair with another woman, suspected she was cheating on him, believed the second child was not his, and was tired of her nagging. Jason did not want a divorce because he did not want to pay child support or lose custody of her. Before her death, Jason told a coworker that he wanted Christina dead. On the morning of her death, Jason called her company to inquire about a $100,000 life insurance policy, and in that call, he said Christina had died the night before. The jury heard clear evidence that Jason not only wanted Christina dead, but that he had tried to hire someone to kill her. He planned to do this and knew where to buy illegal drugs. In fact, he had purchased them on multiple occasions to give to Christina. At trial, multiple witnesses testified that Christina did not use drugs recreationally. Christina was very careful about what she consumed because she was breastfeeding. Furthermore, tests showed that her frozen breast milk contained no harmful substances. To support the theory that Jason had poisoned Christina's food, the prosecution presented toxicology reports. For example, Dr. Judge argued that Christina's death could have been caused by ingestion of some kind of poison. The prosecution ruled out injection because no traces of injection or needles were found at the scene. Dr. Judge also testified that inhalation was unlikely because no rolled-up dollar bills or snorting paper were found at the scene. The court gave Jason Harris a chance to speak, but he did not apologize or show remorse. Instead, he insisted that he was innocent. The judge said, "The jury did not believe your lies," ultimately exposing him as a selfish and deceitful murderer. On November 17, 2021, the jury found Jason Harris, 47, guilty on all charges. 3 weeks later, the court sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He has appealed the verdict, however. After the trial, prosecutor David Layton expressed his condolences to Christina's family and friends, emphasizing that this was a tragic case. Layton went on to say, "While this case has many unique and media-driven details, the most important thing is the family's loss. I hope this verdict helps them find comfort in knowing that justice has been served." Jason requested a new trial on the grounds that his defense attorney did not do a good job. He introduced evidence in the form of his attorney's testimony, showing that his defense attorney failed to seek an independent expert opinion on the prosecution's evidence and failed to consult with an independent toxicologist. Jason's defense attorney explained this decision as part of a trial strategy because he had thoroughly questioned Dr. Hunter and was able to show the jury that Dr. Hunter had changed his opinion about the cause of death based on information from a related civil lawsuit. In February 2024, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld Jason Harris's conviction. He remains in prison for life without the possibility of parole. The case of Teresa Conal. James Conal was born on February 22, 1950, in Dayton, Ohio. He was the son of Ruth Slack and John Conley. They had 4 more daughters and 3 sons. The family was wealthy. His grandfather, Fred Conley, was a successful businessman and inventor who founded a company and held nearly 300 patents for innovations, including one of the first price marking machines. Despite his business success, little is known about James' early life. However, it is clear that he chose a different career path. Instead of joining the family business, he moved to North Georgia, where he worked diligently to create a successful company in the field of holistic medicine. James was assisted by Bonnie White, the accounting manager of his company. In return for her work, James also provided chiropractic care to Bonnie's children and grandchildren. As Bonnie said, James's kind and compassionate nature helped him build a loyal clientele. Over time, the business grew and James realized the need to hire more employees. At the time, 21-year-old Teresa Conal applied for the job and was accepted. She would be responsible for welcoming visitors to the company. Teresa, who was from Harlan, Kentucky, met James when she got a job at his company. Despite their 20-year age difference, they fell in love and began dating. After marrying in 1997, Teresa and her husband had their first son, Caleb, in 1996. They later opened the Alpha Wellness Center in Dalton, Georgia. At the center, Teresa worked as a massage therapist, helping people achieve good health. As a friend of the couple, Bonnie witnessed their professional growth. She said that Teresa was a truly wonderful massage therapist. Their second child, Allison, was born in 2000. And soon after, they moved to a spacious house in Ringgold, Georgia, located near the tennis courts. The marriage was stable and happy, and the children grew up in comfort and love. Christmas was a special time of year for Caleb, who immersed himself in the joy of the holiday season, surrounded by gifts, a beautifully decorated tree, and the warmth of a fireplace. As he immersed himself in the happiness of the moment, he dreamed of many ways to protect himself and, in turn, his loved ones. James took out a $500,000 life insurance policy from Tom Drew, naming Teresa as the sole beneficiary. He also insured their home at the same time. However, their ideal life begins to fall apart over time due to growing rumors of infidelity in their marriage. At Alpha Healthcare, the news eventually spread to all the staff. Unfortunately, the situation worsened due to rumors of infidelity in James and Teresa's marriage, as well as financial difficulties. James's health began to decline after contracting Lyme disease, leaving him unable to work. Meanwhile, Teresa underwent 4 surgeries and suffered a miscarriage, leading to severe depression and substance abuse. At the same time, Bonnie discovered that Teresa had been illegally embezzling money from the business. In 1 month, Teresa herself wrote 16 checks. When James confronted her about this in front of Bonnie, his wife denied everything, claiming that the checks had been canceled. However, Bonnie, as the accountant, claimed that the canceled checks would not be cleared through the bank, and she later produced a bank statement, putting Teresa in an awkward position. A rumor began to circulate among the couple's staff, claiming that Teresa had secretly put lithium in James's coffee. James himself eventually revealed the rumor, rather than suppress the speculation. An investigation revealed that their relationship had deteriorated to the point where divorce was being considered, although the details remained unclear. By mid-2007, the family situation had become unstable. 2 cars had been repossessed and James appeared visibly depressed. However, the announcement that he was about to be evicted for failing to pay the mortgage was a wake-up call for the couple. Teresa devised a plan to resolve her marital, financial and personal crises. The plan began with her pretending to be her husband and writing a letter to their agent, Tom Drew, stating that her husband had decided to end his life. Early on Friday morning, June 29, 2007, Teresa prepared to carry out the rest of her plan. During their usual breakfast, Teresa secretly added strong antidepressants to her husband's food. In the meantime, she refused to eat, telling her husband that a friend named Robin would be picking her and the children up. The woman took the children to a friend's house after James had taken the medication. Teresa then returned home to prepare for her trip. She quickly gathered what she considered important items, including photos of the children. Next, she lit a fire between the office and the bedroom. Caleb and his sister were waiting in the car and saw their mother leave the house last. She lit a cigarette as she walked away. From the car, Caleb noticed smoke coming from the house and became frightened. He warned his mother about the smoke, but she reassured him that it was just burning papers and that there was nothing to worry about. Gary Carlock, a local grocery store owner, was on his way to work when he saw smoke coming from a house and quickly called emergency services. Fire crews arrived at the scene at 9:42 a.m. After assessing the situation, they determined that the fire could not be extinguished from the outside, so they decided to enter the house through the back door, which led directly to the bedroom. A firefighter examined the room and noticed a disturbing image on their thermal imaging equipment, indicating the presence of a person. As they cautiously approached through the smoke, they found the person kneeling by the bed, apparently praying. The person was unconscious but did not appear to have suffered severe heat burns. However, their skin and clothing were heavily covered in smoke. Firefighters described the scene as a typical arson fire. They initially identified the victim as James, 57, the homeowner, and quickly pronounced him dead. The raging fire destroyed everything, including potential DNA evidence or signs of foul play, leading police to initially suspect the death was accidental. Police eventually reached James' wife, Teresa, by phone to report the incident, who was in Georgia. When Teresa left town, she contacted her insurance agent just minutes later. However, the children were devastated to hear the news about James, their beloved father. Although they had their own problems, he always showed them how important they were in his life. An extensive investigation was launched, but progress was slow due to a lack of leads. Teresa was interviewed by police that evening and recounted the events of the morning. She said she left the house at 8:15 a.m. and stopped at a restaurant on the way. Robin, Teresa's friend, was also questioned, and his story largely matched Teresa's, except that he claimed they left 30 minutes later, at 8:45 a.m. The fire inspector determined that the fire started at a point along the shared wall between the office and the bedroom where the victim was found. As officers continued to search the house, a trained dog was brought in to assist. The dog helped detect the presence of arson at the source of the fire, clearly indicating that it was set deliberately rather than accidentally. On July 5, 2007, officers interviewed Teresa to piece together the events of that day. Teresa stated that she loved her husband very much and attributed their financial difficulties solely to James' illness. She described their marriage as stable and reliable. Friends and colleagues of James confirmed that his failing health had forced him to stop working, causing difficulties for his business. At the time, Tom Drew reported to police that he had received a handwritten letter from James in which James expressed his intention to end his life. However, there were countless ways to do it, much simpler, less painful. It was hard to believe he would choose such a method. The medical examiner determined James' cause of death to be smoke inhalation, and toxicology tests showed that he had been under the influence of strong antidepressants at the time of the fire. Burns on the soles of his feet indicated that he had tried to put out the flames. Based on this evidence, forensic psychologist Sanji believed the death was the result of homicide. Police re-interviewed Robin, focusing on inconsistencies between his account of events and Teresa's. Robin testified that after putting the children in the car, Teresa went back into the house and did not return for 15 to 20 minutes. The investigation led the team to a restaurant where Teresa and her children stopped for a snack. Security footage showed them arriving at 9:17 a.m. on the day of the fire. Since their home was only a 10-minute drive away, police suspected that Teresa might have been home when the fire started. A closer look at the timeline confirmed this theory, and police obtained a search warrant for Teresa Connell's home. When they arrived, they found the family's personal belongings stored in the garage, as well as unfiled divorce papers. Further investigation uncovered 2 insurance policies, one for life and one for the home. As police zeroed in on Teresa, they learned details about the loss of her youngest child and her subsequent drug addiction. From that point on, based on the evidence they found, she was considered the prime suspect. During a subsequent interview, the couple's employees talked about rumors of an affair, so police decided to call Teresa back. During her second conversation with the police, Teresa not only defended herself, but also began to change her story. According to Teresa, her husband James was a cruel madman, and she even said that in her opinion, he was capable of starting the fire himself, even if it meant completely destroying the property. When asked by the police, she told them about the morning of the incident. Teresa tried to recall her morning routine. She said that she and her husband usually woke up around 6:30 to 7 o'clock. They usually spent this time together, either drinking coffee or chatting. However, she could not provide further details, saying that her actions were out of habit. The drugs found in James' blood were the first topic that the police wanted to address, so they started by asking Teresa about the drugs her husband was taking. Initially, she listed them without any problem, but when the police wanted to know which specific drug made James sleepy, she suddenly forgot the name. She then asked for a moment. She tried to recall the name, which began with a C, presumably C. Carville. However, when asked about the insurance policy, which they believed would be a crucial solution to the woman's problems, Teresa chose to downplay its importance, claiming that she did not even care to know the value of the policy. It was clear that the investigation would be difficult, but Teresa persisted. The police then revealed an equally important piece of information. An incendiary substance had been discovered at the crime scene, but Teresa once again seemed to dodge the issue. Teresa defended her actions by explaining that her husband had painted the house a few days earlier, which would explain the presence of an incendiary substance. She also suggested that this substance could have been the cause of the fire and could have accelerated the spread of the fire. During the investigation, Teresa mentioned that she and her husband often drank coffee together every morning. The police found this information suspicious, thinking that she might have taken advantage of this opportunity to secretly give her husband sedatives. However, Teresa later revealed that her husband had not had coffee with her in recent months. This statement was completely contrary to her previous statement, and the police immediately pointed out the contradiction. Teresa even denied her own words and contradicted herself. At that time, the police only had circumstantial evidence against her, until one of them suggested that she take a lie detector test, suggesting that she would do everything to prove that she did not kill her husband. However, before the test, Teresa was required to sign a written agreement stating that if the results showed deception, the police could use this evidence against her in court. As she prepared to undergo the test, Teresa's concerns shifted from the original crime to a new fear, the possibility that the polygraph test could be used as evidence against her if she failed. Before taking the polygraph test, she was concerned about how much information the police had on her, as a false answer could seriously damage her case. However, the results of the polygraph test showed that she exceeded the maximum lie detector threshold, indicating that she was likely hiding something. Based on the evidence gathered, on July 9, 2007, Teresa, 34, was charged with premeditated murder and 2 counts of first-degree arson. Her attorney later argued that the fire that led to the charges was actually a joint plan between Teresa and her husband, designed to improve their financial situation. After Teresa was arrested, her children, Allison, 6, and Caleb, 11, were placed in the care of Georgia Children and Family Services. During an interview on July 16, Caleb showed a surprising level of interest for his age. He told police what had happened that morning, including his mother returning home while he and his sister were in the car. Caleb also mentioned noticing smoke shortly afterward. He explained that his parents often burned trash in the backyard, which made the smoke seem normal at first. However, police said it was unlikely that his mother would have chosen to burn the trash just before leaving. Instead, they suspect she may have given James drugs that rendered him unconscious, then set fire to the bedroom while he was still in bed. Understandably, this was difficult for the children. However, despite the traumatic experience deeply affecting their young minds, they remained strong. Caleb's grandparents were then able to obtain custody, and the court was compassionate enough to allow Teresa to visit them. The police then shared evidence with Teresa, clarifying that her children could be called to testify against her. Initially, her defense contacted the district attorney's office, asking for a plea deal. The deputy district attorney investigating the case admitted that she had reached a fair and reasonable plea deal, not wanting her children to go through such trauma. 2 days after the trial, Teresa accepted the plea deal. On the morning of December 10, 2010, a hearing was held. At the hearing, the judge asked Teresa if she would plead guilty to aggravated manslaughter, to which she answered yes. Teresa later explained to the court that her actions were part of a financial scheme, but that she never intended to harm her husband. She asked the court for leniency. The court accepted her testimony and, as a result, granted her more visitation time with her children. Additionally, Teresa Conal was convicted of first-degree arson. The state dropped the premeditated murder charge as part of the plea agreement. Teresa was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 30 years. The case of Dalia DiPolito. On a sunny afternoon in Bon Beach, Florida, a man named Muhammad visited the local police department with a shocking story. He claimed that a woman, whom he knew only as Delilah, had approached him with an unusual and disturbing request. Muhammad alleged that Delilah had offered to hire him to commit a murder. While his story seemed plausible, Muhammad failed to provide one crucial detail: Delilah's last name. Despite this limitation, the Bonn Beach Police Department took Muhammad's claim seriously and launched an investigation. The detectives were tasked with identifying the mysterious Delilah and determining who her husband was. To gather more information, they decided to use Muhammad as bait to set up a meeting with Delilah. They chose a local mobile gas station as the meeting location, given Muhammad's statement that Delilah lived nearby. At the designated meeting spot, the police set up several surveillance vehicles to monitor the encounter, hoping to gather evidence and piece together the puzzle surrounding Delilah's identity and motives. Before the woman arrived, the detectives briefed Muhammad on what to say to her. They secretly fitted him with a wire and recorder, allowing them to listen in on their conversation as it happened. As they continued to monitor the mobile gas station, the detectives focused on the interaction between Muhammad and a woman named Delilah. What surprised them was Delilah's appearance, which didn't fit the typical profile of someone who would want her husband killed. Delilah, an attractive woman wearing a skirt and tank top, got into the car with Muhammad. Muhammad, pretending to be hesitant, asked if it was worth having someone killed. Delilah replied that she couldn't divorce her husband because she feared he would retaliate if she tried to leave him and divide their assets. The woman told Muhammad that after her husband's murder, she intended to create an alibi by going to a different location, such as Boca Raton. Muhammad then asked her if anyone would suspect her of involvement in her husband's death, and she confidently replied that no one would accuse her. The detectives were stunned by the woman's casual tone as she discussed hiring a hitman to kill her husband. As they continued to listen, they were horrified by the woman's nonchalant attitude, which made it seem like she was discussing a routine business deal rather than arranging for someone's murder. At one point, she even showed Muhammad photos of her husband, which further revealed her callous disregard for human life. During the conversation, the woman made a stunning admission to Muhammad, revealing that she planned to pay a hitman to kill her husband. This confession was a crucial breakthrough for the detective, as it confirmed the woman's involvement in soliciting a murder. However, the detective knew that to build a stronger case, they needed to gather more evidence. The woman told Muhammad that she would withdraw $1,000 in cash and hand it over to the hitman later. After discussing the plan with Muhammad, the woman left the mobile gas station and drove home. The detectives followed her to gather information about her address. A records check revealed that the address belonged to Dahlia Doe, not Delilah as they had initially thought. With this new information, the detectives ran a background check on the vehicle Dahlia used to meet Muhammad at the gas station. This allowed them to obtain the registered owner's name, which was her husband, Mike Doe. To their friends, Mike and Dahlia seemed like a loving and happy couple. The two had met when Mike was browsing the internet at work, looking for something to do when he was feeling bored. Mike found a website that offered escort services and decided to hire one. This decision would have a profound impact on his life. When the escort arrived, Mike was immediately drawn to her physical attractiveness. He thought she was exceptionally beautiful, and he felt an undeniable attraction between them. As they spent more time together, they quickly developed a strong connection, effortlessly engaging in friendly conversations over the next few days. Mike and Dahlia's friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship after they spent a weekend together. They quickly realized their feelings for each other went beyond friendship. As a result, they became a committed couple. A few months into their relationship, they stumbled upon an engagement ring store, which led to a conversation about marriage, a topic they had previously discussed. Mike was drawn to the idea of spending his life with Dahlia and decided to purchase a ring, symbolizing his commitment to their future together. Despite their relationship moving quickly, Mike was deeply happy and in love. Before meeting Dahlia, Mike had a troubled past. In 2001, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison in Broward County, Florida, for grand theft, fraud, and false telephone sales. At the time, Mike was struggling with drug addiction and desperation for money, which he later acknowledged was no excuse for his mistakes. Mike served his 2-year sentence and was given 28 years of probation. The court granted Mike a lengthy probation period to give him time to pay back the significant amount of money he owed. However, when Mike returned home, he was unsure of how he would repay the debt. Determined to settle his debt, Mike found a job as a cook at a local restaurant, earning $350 weekly, which was insufficient to make a notable dent in the substantial amount he owed. To improve his financial situation and secure an early release from probation, Mike sought a better-paying job. A friend offered him an office job near his home, allowing him to transition from cooking to email marketing. As Mike and Dahlia started dating, he eventually confided in her about his probation and the limitations it imposed. Mike explained that he required permission to leave the state while on probation. Dahlia, who had a strong desire to travel, expressed her wish to explore the world with Mike. To help Mike become debt-free, Dahlia offered to provide $91,000 if he paid the remaining balance, enabling them to clear the debt and start the life Dahlia had envisioned. Dahlia, a successful real estate agent, was financially stable and able to help her partner Mike pay off his debt and clear his name. Mike consulted his attorney to understand the process, and the attorney advised him to gather the necessary funds to be released from probation. To facilitate the payment, Dahlia and Mike agreed that she would send the money from her Bank of America account to the attorney. Dahlia informed Mike that she had transferred the funds, but when Mike followed up with the attorney, he was told that the payment had not been received. Mike waited a day and then asked Dahlia about the status of the transfer. However, Dahlia insisted that she had sent the money, leaving Mike frustrated and unsure about what was happening. Mike's concern grew, so he contacted his attorney again, only to be told that they still hadn't received anything. Dahlia claimed to have sent the money to the attorney, but couldn't explain the delay. 2 days had passed since the transaction, but the attorney remained without the funds. Mike asked Dahlia for proof of the transaction, needing the receipt to verify the details. However, Dahlia suspected foul play, suggesting the attorney might have stolen the money. She vowed to find the missing sum, while Mike sought to move past the misunderstanding. Meanwhile, a supervisor at the Bon Beach Police Department reached out to Sergeant Whitey Jean for assistance. Sergeant Jean met with a detective working on Dahlia Deo's case. The detective briefed Sergeant Whitey Jean on the case, revealing that Dahlia wanted to hire someone to kill her husband. The detective explained that Dahlia was waiting for a call from the would-be hitman, and asked Sergeant Whitey Jean to pretend to be the hitman and arrange a meeting with her. Sergeant Whitey Jean agreed to help with the investigation and took on the role of the hitman. As the hitman, he contacted Dahlia and demanded a $3,000 advance and the key to her house. The detective had requested the key as part of their plan to make Dahlia believe the murder would happen at her home. However, Dahlia was unhappy about the payment demand and called Muhammad, the informant, to express her concerns. During the call, the detective overheard Dahlia's fears and worried that they might have scared her off. They feared that Dahlia might change her mind and find someone else to commit the crime. On August 3, 2009, Dahlia met with Sergeant Whitey Jean, who was posing as a hitman, in a CVS parking lot. However, Dahlia didn't bring the agreed-upon payment, which led Sergeant Whitey Jean to warn her that if he had to wait until after the murder to get paid, she would need to give him $7,000 in cash up front. Sergeant Whitey Jean explained to Dahlia that he would plan the staged break-in and murder of her husband Mike on Wednesday morning, taking advantage of the recent robberies in the area. He outlined his plan to make it look like a legitimate break-in, shooting Mike twice in the head to make it appear like a robbery gone wrong. Sergeant Whitey Jean also told Dahlia that he would contact her a few days after the murder, as he knew the police would be closely monitoring her activities in the aftermath of the crime. Sergeant Whitey Jean cautioned Dahlia that the delay was essential to avoid raising suspicions and maintaining the operation's secrecy. During their conversation, he gave her multiple opportunities to withdraw from the murder-for-hire plot. However, Dahlia expressed her unwavering commitment, stating she was 5,000% certain about her decision to have her husband killed. Dahlia provided Sergeant Whitey Jean with crucial details, revealing that her husband, Mike, followed a predictable morning routine, walking the dog at a specific time and leaving the house unlocked. This information was vital to the success of the plan. She also told the sergeant that she would create an alibi by going to the gym during the murder, ensuring her absence from the house when the crime would take place. The sergeant instructed Dahlia to arrive at the gym by 6 a.m. and informed her that he would enter her home at 6:30 a.m. After speaking with Dahlia, Sergeant Whitey Jean was taken aback by her extraordinary cruelty, having encountered few individuals in his line of work who exhibited a similar level of ruthlessness. The detective wanted to create a fake crime scene at Dahlia and Mike's home to see how Dahlia would react on the day of the alleged hit. To do this, they needed to know Dahlia's whereabouts. At 5:30 a.m., Dahlia told Mike she was going to the gym, which Mike found unusual since she had never gone that early before. However, he didn't think much of it and continued with his morning routine. The detective kept an eye on Dahlia to make sure she went to the gym and went inside. This confirmed that the plan could move forward. But before setting up the faked crime scene, the detective needed to fill Mike Dio in on what was happening. About 30 minutes after Dahlia left for the gym, loud banging noises were heard at Mike and Dahlia's house, prompting Mike to rush to the door. When he opened it, he was surprised to find several police officers standing there. Confused and worried, Mike asked them what was going on. The detective informed Mike that his wife, Dahlia, had tried to hire a hitman to kill him, but the hitman was actually an undercover cop. The entire situation was a setup to look like a murder-for-hire plot. Mike was in shock when the police told him that his wife had hired someone to kill him. The detectives took him to the police station, leaving his home to be staged as a crime scene with fake police tape and lights. The detectives then called Dahlia, telling her that they needed to question her about an incident involving her husband. When she arrived home, she found her house surrounded by police cars and crime scene tape. The detective told her that her husband had been murdered, and she broke down in tears. However, the detective noticed that Dahlia's reaction seemed unusual, as she didn't produce any tears. The detective began questioning Dahlia about suspects, trying to get her to confess to hiring the hitman. Dahlia claimed that her marriage was fine and that Mike's problems with probation and a stock fraud conviction might have led to his murder. Unbeknownst to her, Mike was watching from another room. The detective then revealed that they knew the truth behind the murder and brought in Sergeant Whitey Jean, who Dahlia claimed she didn't know. The detective arrested Dahlia for solicitation of murder, revealing that the hitman was an undercover cop. Mike was given the chance to confront Dahlia, but she refused to admit her guilt. Dahlia's trial took place on April 26, 2011, where Mike testified against her for 3 days. Her defense argued that the entire plot was a publicity stunt for a reality TV show, but Mike denied any involvement. Mike denied any interest in reality TV shows and claimed he had no involvement in Dahlia's alleged plot to kill him. He also stated he had no knowledge of public relations. After the trial, the jury found Dahlia guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder with a firearm, and she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Mike was relieved by the verdict, but also felt a sense of closure, knowing justice had been served. However, Dahlia's attorneys appealed the conviction, citing a juror's remark about Dahlia poisoning Mike's Starbucks drink, which was not presented as evidence during the trial. The appellate court reversed the conviction, and a second trial was held. Despite the state's confidence in their case, the jury reached a hung verdict, resulting in a mistrial. A third trial was held, and Dahlia was again found guilty, this time receiving a 16-year prison sentence. Dahlia's defense team continued to appeal her conviction, but the Florida Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review her case. Her attorneys planned to file a motion with a federal judge to review the third trial for constitutional violations, which would be their last chance to secure a new trial. Despite her conviction, Dahlia has become a respected figure in prison, leading a Bible study group and earning praise from fellow inmates. She is separated from her young son, who lives with his grandmother, and deeply misses being with him. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. Catherine Wells Burr was born in 1989 in the United Kingdom to parents Phil and Jane Wells Burr. She has an older sister named Lynn. In the summer of 2010, Catherine met Rafael Novak, a 31-year-old co-worker, on a university break while working on a new vacuum cleaner production line. Rafael was an immigrant from Poland with a previous marriage and a son, had moved to England 4 years earlier seeking a better life. Rafael and Catherine started dating, initially meeting for lunch at the production site cafe, but soon progressing to romantic dinners. Rafael showered Catherine with gifts, took Catherine to movies, and went on walks with Catherine. As their relationship deepened, Rafael shared his past and reasons for moving to the UK with Catherine. Rafael's trustworthy nature allows her to open up completely to him. Within a few months, Catherine introduced Rafael to her parents, who welcomed him into their family and hoped for Rafael and Catherine's future happiness. Soon, Rafael and Catherine began planning their wedding. Catherine graduated with honors from Bath Spa University in 2011 and secured a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the manufacturer of Henry vacuum cleaners. Her career progressed quickly, helping her have good job opportunities. Catherine is smart, highly educated, and has good interaction skills with others. She shows genuine interest in her co-workers' problems and cares for those around her. Her kind demeanor and radiant smile have earned her the admiration of her colleagues, who view her as a young leader. Catherine's career was advancing swiftly, and her substantial earnings, combined with those of her partner Rafael, allowed them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace in Willow Way. Although they were financially secure, they opted to take out a mortgage, securing insurance coverage as per their agreement with the bank. With their youth, successful careers, and love for each other, it seemed they had all the ingredients for happiness. However, the fateful day of September 12, 2012, marked a turning point in their lives, changing everything forever. On September 12, 2012, Orlando, a local resident, was driving home after a night shift at the gas station. He is in a hurry to take his daughter Maria to kindergarten as he promised his wife. While driving, he noticed black smoke coming from a nearby parking lot after turning a sharp corner. Smoke billowed from a car engulfed in flames. Orlando stopped and tried to get a closer look but couldn't due to the intense fire. When firefighters arrived 4 minutes later, the car was completely burned out. The police cordoned off the area to keep onlookers away. The location was relatively deserted due to the early hour, and there were no witnesses to the incident. Upon investigation, a charred body was found. The police needed to identify the victim and determine the cause of death. There were no signs of a car accident or any evidence of another vehicle being involved. The police initially suspected that the car may have caught fire due to a malfunction or self-ignition. A thorough investigation was conducted, involving multiple expert analyses. The remains were sent to a forensic laboratory to determine the identity and cause of death. The police also examined fragments of the burned vehicle to identify any malfunctions and establish the cause of the fire. The police began by checking the missing persons database and recent reports of disappearances. They quickly identified the deceased as 23-year-old Catherine Wells Burr. On the same day, Rafael Novak filed a missing persons report for his girlfriend, Catherine. According to Rafael, he left for work at 5:30 a.m. while Catherine was still asleep. When she failed to show up for work, and Rafael couldn't find her at any of her relatives' homes, he contacted the police. The investigation involved interviewing the victim's family, including her parents and sister, as well as Rafael, her colleagues, and friends. By gathering information about the last days and years of Catherine's life, the police were able to reconstruct the events leading up to her tragic death. The investigation into Catherine's disappearance continued to uncover shocking details about her life with Rafael. As the truth began to emerge, it became clear that their relationship had been built on lies from the start. Rafael, a 29-year-old man from Poland, had left his wife and child behind to escape his debts. He moved to the UK, where he met Anna Levick, with whom he had a long-term relationship starting in 2008. When Rafael met Catherine, he initially maintained relationships with both women. However, he eventually chose Catherine, believing she offered more stability and financial security. Catherine, unaware of Rafael's true intentions, genuinely desired a happy marriage and family with him. Meanwhile, Rafael was secretly planning to kill Catherine, intending to use the life insurance payout and the large house they shared to fund a new life with his mistress, Anna. The murder was carefully planned and executed with exceptional cruelty. On the day Catherine went missing, Rafael waited a few hours before reporting her disappearance to her boss, pretending to be frantically worried about her whereabouts. He feigned panic and despair in front of Catherine's colleagues and relatives, claiming she had been receiving threatening letters from a mentally unstable admirer. When Catherine's car was found missing and she was not at her parents' home or her own, Rafael's fake concern led Catherine's family to contact the police. Rafael recounted that the evening before her disappearance had been normal evening. Rafael and Catherine went for a walk, bought groceries, had dinner, watched TV, and went to bed together. Catherine seemed calm. However, a thorough investigation revealed that her death occurred earlier. She was strangled around 2 a.m., likely in her own bed while asleep. Her body was placed in the car, driven a short distance, and set on fire to destroy evidence. Rafael Novak had a solid alibi, as he was at work from 5:30 a.m. He claimed Catherine was asleep in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m. However, Rafael was still at home at 1:30 a.m., which significantly altered the case's direction. As a result, Rafael Novak became the prime suspect in Catherine Wells-Burr's murder. The evidence allowed for Rafael to be detained pending further investigation. Rafael claimed that Catherine was being stalked, which had caused her significant distress. However, during the investigation, it was discovered that Catherine had a secret online life. She had accounts on several adult websites, where she shared intimate photos and engaged in flirtatious conversations with men. A letter from a secret admirer was also found. Despite attempts to mislead the investigation, evidence was uncovered that proved Rafael's direct involvement in Catherine's demise. Notably, Rafael had a motive to kill Catherine. Investigators found that he had been in continuous communication with Anna Legwinowicz, and they had met regularly over the past few months. Furthermore, it was discovered that Rafael had a financial motive. Shortly before Catherine's death, they had both taken out life insurance policies worth £123,000. Rafael and Catherine were the sole beneficiaries of each other's policies, meaning they would receive the payouts in the event of the other's death. The main motive behind Catherine's death and the burning of her car to mislead the investigation was found to be a large life insurance payout. On the day she went missing, Catherine sent a message to Anna's phone. Additionally, security cameras showed Anna and her uncle filling a gas can at a gas station a few days before the crime. This new information brought a third person into the investigation. Anna Legwinowicz, 32, and her uncle, Tadeusz Dimitrison, 38, along with Rafał Novak, are suspected of being accomplices in a premeditated crime and arson to cover up evidence. The crime was carefully planned by them over several months. They created accounts on adult websites, uploaded doctored images of Catherine, and created chats with various men to mislead the investigation. When faced with undeniable evidence, Rafał and Anna couldn't deny their involvement any longer and began blaming each other. Rafał claimed that Anna, driven by jealousy, planned and carried out the crime to eliminate Catherine. In contrast, Anna accused Rafał of committing the crime out of greed, seeking to secure the insurance payout for the house. To avoid detection, the conspirators forged much evidence related to Catherine. They created fake profiles about Catherine on dating websites, portraying her as a promiscuous and highly sexual woman. Also, to cover their tracks, the conspirators burned Catherine's body and created a fake story about her. They invented a fictitious lover, and they believed that he might be responsible for Catherine's death. One of the conspirators even sent a text message from Catherine's phone to this fictitious person, suggesting that she was on her way to meet him. However, forensic experts discovered that when the fire broke out, Catherine was only wearing her favorite nightgown, not an appropriate outfit to meet someone. Despite the evidence, Rafał refused to acknowledge his involvement in Catherine's death. Instead, he told Jane, Catherine's mother, that her daughter was receiving threatening emails and text messages from an ex-boyfriend who said if he couldn't have her, no one could. Rafał also claimed that Catherine had spoken of taking her own life. In a shocking display of deceit, Rafał allowed Catherine's parents to comfort him, believing he was also mourning the loss of Catherine he loved. Rafał's acting was incredibly convincing. After Catherine's death, her mother, Jane, was so taken in by his performance that she hugged him and allowed him to call her mom. Jane explained that in the early stages of the investigation, the police viewed Rafał more as a witness than a suspect, so she decided to offer him her full support. Her reasoning was that if Catherine had loved him that much and he was considered part of their family, then he deserved their support. The trial, chaired by Justice Sharp, began and the jury heard that Rafał and his two co-defendants stood to gain a significant amount from Catherine's death. They hoped to receive a life insurance payout of £123,000 and half ownership of a two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000. During the trial, it was revealed that when police found Catherine's body in her burned car on the morning of September 12, Rafał showed no emotion. Anna Legwinowicz frequently shook her head and laughed in court when it was suggested she was responsible for the crime, but refused to testify. Tadeusz also chose not to testify in his defense. The judge, Justice Sharp, told the defendants the murder was a horrific and merciless crime. The defendants showed no emotion during sentencing. The judge described Anna Legwinowicz's behavior as deceitful, manipulative, and cruel, and stated she played a significant role in the crime. He also told Tadeusz that the murder was committed for gain, with many aggravating circumstances and no mitigating ones. The judge expressed deep sympathy for Catherine's parents, who had no idea that Rafał Novak's charming facade hid a monster. Rafał's actions were driven by financial gain, as he had no emotional ties to Catherine. Catherine's mother stated that the brutal and calculated manner of her daughter's death would haunt them forever. She regretted not having the chance to say goodbye or express her love, and now considers Rafał an evil person who deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. Catherine's father, Philip, added that they had welcomed Rafał into their home, treating him like a son, only to be betrayed by him. During the trial, Rafał Novak became emotional in the witness box. He denied any involvement in the death of his girlfriend, Catherine Wells-Burr. Rafał claimed everyone was blaming him for a crime he did not commit. However, the court heard that Rafał showed no emotion when the police discovered Catherine's body in her burned-out car on September 12 last year. Catherine's mother, Jane Wells-Burr, testified that after his initial release from police custody, Raffel asked for a steak dinner and didn't even mention Catherine. Jane Wells Burr stated that her daughter's fate was sealed when she and Raffel bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy. She believes that in signing the contract, Catherine also signed her own death warrant. Ultimately, the court found Raffel Novak guilty of suffocating Catherine with a pillow while she slept. He had conspired with his secret lover, Anna Legwinowicz, and her uncle, Tadeusz, to claim a £123,000 life insurance payout and a share of the house. Anna and Tadeusz had transported Catherine's body in her car to a remote location and set it on fire. Raffel and Anna were sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 32 years, while Tadeusz received a 27-year sentence. After the verdict, Catherine's parents, Philip and Jane Wells Burr, advocated for stricter immigration laws. They believed that if the UK had more stringent immigration rules, like the US, Raffel Novak would not have been allowed entry. Raffel had previously been convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland. Philip and Jane, who divorced after Catherine's death, blamed the European Union for the UK's lenient immigration policies. Jane stated that the UK does not thoroughly check people entering the country. She was unaware of Raffel's previous assault charge in Poland and believes the government needs to prevent individuals like Raffel from freely entering the country. Following the verdict, Catherine's mother paid tribute to her daughter, describing her as a beautiful, determined, and hard-working individual who earned a first-class degree from the University of Bath Spa. Catherine's family expressed their devastation and loss, stating they were proud of her accomplishments and had no idea how to move forward without her. They believed she had great potential and a promising life ahead, but it was cruelly taken away from her and her loved ones. The case of Nikita Bergenstrom. Nikita Bergenstrom, born on June 13, 1965, in Pori, Finland, had a difficult childhood. His mother found it hard to manage his behavior, particularly at school where he was known to be a bully. He had a very hot temper, and he clashed often with those around him. By the time Nikita reached young adulthood, he was already encountering problems with the law. This included confrontations with the police and a prison sentence at just 19 years old. It was during this period that Nikita met 17-year-old Marita Radulami. Marita also had a miserable life. The two of them committed crimes together, breaking into houses and stealing from stores in Finland, Sweden, and Denmark. The couple's dynamic was tumultuous, with Marita describing Nikita as controlling and violent. After serving time, 22-year-old Nikita was released from a prison in Turku, Finland, on May 1, 1988. Marita had been eagerly awaiting his release. And the couple soon set their sights on traveling to the Mediterranean, a long-held dream of Nikita's. Before they set off on their adventure, the couple took 2 Angora rabbits with them, which Marita was particularly fond of and took special care to keep safe while traveling. On July 3rd, they arrived in Amal, Sweden, near the Finnish border. During the evening, Nikita committed a burglary and stole a shotgun from a house, planning to use it for an armed robbery. After the burglary, they broke into another nearby home and were later seen escaping the scene on a bicycle they had stolen from the homeowner. Stan Nielsen, 40 years old, the father of the family, had his house broken into, and his 15-year-old son, Frederick, chased Nikita into a nearby cemetery after he stole their bicycle. When Stan demanded that Nikita return the bicycle, Nikita refused. Instead, he pulled out a shotgun he had stolen moments earlier and pointed it at Stan. With the shotgun aimed at Stan, Nikita pulled the trigger. And Stan fell to the ground, dying instantly from a single gunshot wound. Frederick, standing beside his father, cried out in horror alongside Marita and begged Nikita not to fire again. However, Nikita disregarded their pleas and fired the shotgun a second time, killing Frederick instantly. Then, Ewer, Stan's wife and Frederick's mother, set out to find the pair. She came across an old car that Nikita and Marita had stolen, and were now using as shelter. Ewer approached the car and tapped on the window. Nikita responded violently, grabbing Ewer and killing her with a knife. The exact manner of Ewer's death, whether stabbed or having her throat slit, remains unclear due to conflicting sources. An 11-year-old boy, who was camping in the backyard with his friend, was the only family member to survive the attack, remaining unaware of the horror that unfolded just a short distance away. After committing the murders, Marita and Nikita fled the scene. Their getaway car eventually broke down, leading them to steal a replacement vehicle. Marita was determined to keep the rabbits they had with them as they continued their escape. They discarded the shotgun used in the crime and the clothes they were wearing. The murder weapon was later found by the authorities. As news of the crime spread rapidly across the country, local law enforcement urged anyone with information to come forward and report. Marita felt overwhelmed and expressed her desire to return home to Nikita, but he threatened to harm her rabbits and then herself if she refused to follow his orders. However, it's reported that the trail of rabbit droppings left at each abandoned vehicle the couple used played a significant role in their identification. Because the authorities knew about Marita and Nikita, so they was eventually charged. Their photos were subsequently distributed nationwide. Marita and Nikita managed to evade capture for about a week by sneaking past roadblocks and police patrols. Eventually, they were caught in Denmark, just over a week after the murders took place. During their trial, Nikita refused to confess, but Marita provided a full confession and ultimately incriminated herself. Both Marita and Nikita shifted the blame to each other, but the court found Marita's account to be more credible. A psychiatric evaluation initially deemed Marita and Nikita fit to stand trial. However, a forensic psychiatrist later diagnosed Nikita with an antisocial and narcissistic personality disorder. This condition led to uncontrolled outbursts of aggression and a lack of empathy for others. Notably, this is not the first time Nikita has been in trouble with the law, it was actually his 12th. As a result, Nikita received a life sentence for the 3 murders, with the possibility of parole. In contrast, his accomplice, Marita, was given a 2-year sentence for her role in assault, battery, and theft. She only served 1 year of her sentence before being released. Upon her release from jail, she relocated to a different town and changed her name, starting her life anew. Meanwhile, Nikita was transferred to Finland to serve the remainder of his sentence. Over the years, he has made many escapes in 1991, 1994, 2002, and 2004. In 1994, Nikita took a teacher hostage, and in 2002, he was aided by his wife. Following his recapture, Nikita tried to end his life. He also briefly escaped in 2006, evading capture for 2 days before being caught in Helsinki. Despite his repeated attempts to escape, but Nikita was eventually granted parole in February 2008 after spending 19 years behind bars. That same year, he underwent a name change, shifting from his birth name of Juha Valiaka to Nikita Fokantin. He would go on to change his name one more time in 2013, adopting the surname Bergenström and becoming Nikita Bergenström. It was 2 months after his release, Nikita was arrested again for violating his parole terms. The reasons behind his rearrest included drunk driving, operating a vehicle without a license, and running a taxi service without a license. He later was released in February 2009. After 2009, Nikita's life became unstable of a blur, as he apparently repeatedly found himself in and out of prison due to various minor offenses. In 2011, he managed to escape from prison once more. 3 years later, in 2014, Nikita was allegedly involved in a violent fight with 2 inmates, who were possibly instructed or bribed by a prison guard. However, an investigation did not find sufficient evidence to confirm this. Nikita continued his pattern of escape and rearrest. He fled prison again in 2015 and resurfaced in 2018, receiving an 80-day prison sentence for drunk driving. Currently, his exact location remains unknown, but it appears Nikita is no longer incarcerated. Nikita's past is filled with petty crimes, but what drove him to commit 3 murders in one night remains unclear. The severity of his crimes on July 3, 1988, is particularly disturbing.